Good morning. For the record, my name is Tania Fernandez Anderson, the District 7 City Councilor. I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. This hearing is being recorded. It is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN, Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. The Council's budget review process will encompass a series of public hearings beginning in April, beginning today, and running through June. We strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in this process by giving testimony for the record. You can do this in several ways. Attend one of our hearings and give public testimony. We will take public testimony at the end of each departmental hearing and also add 3 hearings dedicated to public testimony. The full hearing schedule is on our website at boston.gov/council-budget. Our scheduled hearings dedicated to public testimony are Tuesday, May 2nd, and at 2 p.m., Tuesday, May 9th at 6 p.m., Thursday, May 18th at 2 p.m. You can give testimony in person here in the chamber or virtually via Zoom. For in-person testimony, please come to the chamber and sign up on the sheet near the entrance. For virtual testimony, you can sign up using our online form on our Council Budget Review website and by emailing the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. When you are called to testify, please state your name and affiliation, residence, and limit your comments to a couple of minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. Email your written testimony to the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. Submit a 2-minute video of your testimony through the form on our website. For more information on the City Council budget process and how to testify, please visit the City Council's budget website at boston.gov/council-budget. Today's hearing is on docket 0760 to 0762, orders for the fiscal year 24 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations, for the school department, and for the post-employment benefits, OPEB. Dockets 0763, 0765 to 0766, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations. Dockets 0764, 0767 to 0768, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. Our focus area for this hearing will be an overview of the fiscal year 24 operating budget. Our panelists for today's hearing are Jim Williamson, Director of OBM, Office of Budget Management, Ashley Goffenberger, Chief Financial Officer, Collector Treasury, City of Boston. I am joined today by my colleagues, Council President Ed Flynn, Councilor at Large Aaron Murphy, District Councilor Liz Braden, District Councilor Kenzie Bach, District Councilor Gabriela Coletta, Councilor at Large Ruthie Louijen, and District Councilor Frank Baker. For our format today, I will allow my council colleagues to give a brief opening statement, 30 seconds, just for your opening statements, and then I will turn the floor over to administration. I'll do round 1 of questions, and then a round 2, and if time allows, a round 3. But before that, we'll take public testimony. So it's round 1 of questioning, public testimony, then round 2, and if time permits, around 3, and then closing. So without further ado, I'll go in the order of arrival. Again, you have 30 seconds for opening statements. Council President Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the important leadership you are providing, and to the team from Mayor Wu's administration for being here and for your leadership as well. I also want to thank City Council Central staff for working with the chair and all of our colleagues as well. I'm not going to go into my traditional talking points other than to say let's work together, let's listen to each other, let's be respectful of each other, and let's try to represent our constituents the best we can. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to budget season and budget hearings. Looking forward to the next several weeks of hearings and working alongside you. And thank you to the Mayor's office for being here and providing this overview. I'm looking forward to this conversation. As we all know, where we spend our money, our budget is our value statement. So looking forward to also coming up with different departments and really pushing and asking to really step up and show that what we say, on the news or in social media is actually what we're going to deliver to the constituents of the City of Boston. That's what we as a council here have been elected to do. So just looking forward to the conversation. And I do want to say thank you to Shane Pack, our new liaison on central staff to Ways and Means. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the administration team for being here this morning. I'm going to keep it very brief. I'm looking forward to the conversation. This is when we really get into the nuts and bolts of the city budget and figure out where our priorities are and how we can make it all work. So I look forward to the conversation, and thank you for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the team from the administration. The first budget hearing that I ever sat in was in 2016, and I was a budget staffer sitting in the staff galleries for FY17, and just think it's a really important part of city government every year for the council to go through the scrutiny process and really drill in on all the departments. And so although I won't make it to the end this season, I'm happy to be here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Councilor Coletta.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your leadership throughout this process. Thank you to the OBM team, to the Wu administration, central staff. We all appreciate you. As it's been said before, this is a fiscal document, but it is a statement of our morals, of our values of a city. It says who we are investing in and what we are investing in for future generations. So I'm happy to hear that we have some fiscal buoyancy with the AAA bond rating, so I look forward to understanding how we're leveraging that. This process is our lever as a city council, so I do look forward to diving into the details, figuring out in this conversation how we are spending on our day-to-day personnel and equipment through the operating budget, and of course look forward to the capital conversation later on this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Coletta. Councilor Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and want to thank the administration for being here. Like a lot of my colleagues have stated, this is important. This is one of the most important obligations that we have as city councilors. As an at-large city councilor, I bounce around from neighborhood to neighborhood to really hear and listen to the concerns of our residents, and excited that this budget really is trying to get to the basics, making sure that we are listening to our neighbors in our neighborhoods, especially those from Black and Brown communities that have been historically excluded when we're thinking about processes like Councilor Coletta said. We have this AAA bond rating. We need to be using our fiscal strength, especially to do the work of equity. So I am looking forward to these budget hearings and to the work that we have to do to make sure that we are centering all of our neighborhoods and all of our communities, especially those who've been left behind. So thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, for all of your work.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. Councilor Baker.
Good morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Worrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the administration. And just looking forward to diving into the budget. The budget is a value for all our priorities in the city of Boston. So just looking to working with the administration and the rest of my colleagues to make an equitable budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilor Worrell. I'm looking forward to hosting a transparent and productive conversation with you all. I would like to work together, hopefully with a priority on racial equity. I think most of us here, or if not everyone, is very clear that my focus is obviously economic mobility and development for the most disenfranchised in our Boston communities. And so I would like to, without mixing things up, I pray that I am able to have this conversation with you with integrity, that it's not about embarrassing each other or making this conversation so much of a contrived one, but rather one that we'll be able to learn from each other, if not exchange in ways that we can actually create amendments, if necessary, that would make sense for, again, the betterment of communities in Boston. So I'm looking forward to that. And I guess I'm prefacing all of this with the understanding, or hopefully an agreement, that we will go into this as not a personal process, or that we won't, that we will be respectful of one another, and so that it's not taken personal when we are scrutinizing and asking questions, deep questions, to lead to transparency for the public. But I'm not interested in embarrassing anyone or pointing fingers. So I hope to be able to facilitate this in a way that it's exemplary of, again, integrity and respect. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to give you the floor for your presentation, and immediately, hopefully, we can scan through the RFIs, check for anything that's not answered today, and then hopefully we'll have a list of things that, hopefully you've answered all of the questions, but if not, have a list of the follow-up, and then I'll give the floor to my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Grafenberger. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Boston. I'm pleased to be with you here today to present the fiscal 24 recommended operating budget. I'd like to thank the mayor and her team, my colleagues across the cabinet, Jim Williamson, and the budget team for their work and leadership in crafting this budget. And I'd also like to thank President Flynn, Councilor Anderson, and all of the councilors for their thoughtful input and partnership throughout this process. The operating budget we are presenting today for fiscal year 2024 totals $4.28 billion, which represents a $274 million or 6.8% increase over the prior fiscal year. The overall growth in our budget is really attributable to a rebound in our local revenue and in our local economy, particularly local receipts such as excise tax, paired with the strength and stability of our property tax base is really what allows this budget to grow. This budget growth allows us to meet our fixed and long-term obligations, sustain mission-critical services, and address long-standing pain points across city operations, while also making critical new investments across the city. This budget also reinforces our commitment to responsible financial management, which is reflected in our AAA bond rating, which we just received a few weeks ago for the 9th year in a row. This is an important achievement and a responsibility that we all share to maintain this top bond rating, which allows us to maximize our city dollars toward building our infrastructure. At this point, I will turn it over to Jim to provide some additional context around the budget.
Thank you, Ashley. So my name is Jim Williamson. I'm the budget director here at the City of Boston, and I will point you to the operating budget pie. So this is this represents the annual cost of operating the state's largest municipality, Boston, the place we call home. It exceeds $4 billion. The resource allocation, as displayed in the pie, speaks to the highest priorities in the core responsibilities of local government, including educating its young people. We consider that an investment in our future. Over 40% of the city's annual operating budget goes to public education. Right after that, public safety. We need to live in a safe and comfortable environment. Public safety is critical ensuring that the city is prosperous and successful for all citizens. And then right down the line, from there, you've got city departments, that's your public works and your parks and all of the above. Transportation, mobility, how you get around the city, how efficiently you move around the city is critically important. Health insurance, very, very important component. It takes care of one of the city's strongest assets, its employees who deliver those critical services to residents. Public health, nothing highlights the importance of public health like with the pandemic that we've just come through. Public health is critical. So health and safety are hallmarks of this budget to maintain and support those. We also have fixed costs. These are part of our AAA rating is our responsibility as fiscal stewards to maintain our long-term commitments, to honor and pay down our pension liability, to support our debt service that contributes to our capital plan. Very important part. And then the collective bargaining reserve, another key priority it supports our city's important asset of employees to have fair wages going forward. So we'll move on to the next slide. Oops, went the wrong direction. So this is another table array, puts in another year for comparative purposes. So on the left side of the presentation is appropriations. Those are the dockets that are before you today in different sequencing, but this is the summary of those. I'd like you to point to the growth in collective bargaining. That 123% is us moving forward into supporting contracts going forward. The public schools budget has been approved by school committee. It is before this body now to approve as well. And then on the right side of the slide is fixed costs. So these are some of the long-term commitments that we need to honor to be sort of a fiscally prudent entity. Also in this array, charter school tuition is called out because that is an assessment from the Commonwealth. So all of the charter schools, they are public schools that students that go to charter schools in the city, we are assessed for that cost. And then the MBTA obviously is a fixed cost that we get assessed. So we'll go on to the next slide. So this is just sort of high level, takeaways for budget growth items. So you've got your fair wages, so the collective bargaining for fair wages and retention of city employees. There was lots of talk of filling vacant positions over the last year or so. Some of that came out of the pandemic where positions may have been left, the priorities weren't filling those vacancies, but now it is. The second item is sort of the core city and public health appropriation growth. And it's that foundational support for focusing on the core duties and responsibilities of the city and so foundational support, filling in gaps that we've identified. And we'll talk a little bit how the process was handled a little differently as we get into further strides. And then strategic investments to inform outcomes and to support changes in how we want to improve the city. And the goals are to make this a more equitable, vibrant, healthy, and resilient city. And then, as was displayed in the table, $68 million is for the Boston Public Schools. Our young people that are in the Boston Public School systems are a critical asset for the future of the city. We expect them to sit in roles and be leadership in this chamber and in city government going forward, and having that investment to support that to schools is critically important. And then fixed cost, as itemized in the previous slide on the right side, it maintains the financial stability, meets our commitments, and supports the execution of the capital plan. And with that, I will go on to, so this is a sort of a visual that folks have seen before, but introduced the circled items are sort of things that were introduced in this year, sort of the Wu administration, having the team assembled, coming out of a period of pandemic reaction, there was this a different approach with departments. We also continued our engagement efforts. So last in the winter of 22, we had the listening sessions. Many of you participated in those. So we moved in a different direction. We'd had an existing relationship with Monum, who had moving through the budget. We had those sessions. There were videos in English and Spanish that were put together, basically helping people participate in the process. How you go to a city council hearing, how you navigate to City Hall. It was done through a partnership with Monum. And then, we, in deep, collaboration of the Office of Civic Organizing and ONS and the Equity Cabinet, we hosted workshops with different groups. Many of you participated in those workshops. Again, before the budget was being submitted by city departments, to help them engage in, and we always stress that there are multiple opportunities to engage. Elected officials, city councilors are a primary source of feedback, ONS liaisons, community meetings. All of these feedback loops are, what we call constructively redundant. Like, the more you hear, the more, but it doesn't prevent you from having that, needing to reach out and find the folks that aren't, what are you missing? Who's different? What perspective are we missing? So I think through our engagement efforts, we sought to try to push that out and make sure people were equipped to engage. And then in January, we had these conversations. We try to avoid sort of having, long memos and forms to fill out. We just wanted to have a conversation with departments. We met with every single department in January and, in person. And we wanted to focus on what city government does beyond the flashy sort of new investments, sort of what are the core duties, what are things that sort of might have people stepped back from a little bit, that they need to reacquaint themselves with basic city services that, so they're no longer reacting to or managing around the pandemic. What are the services that are so important to the residents of Boston? And again, we were always circling back on, did we miss something? Is there any part of this engagement process that we're missing? And so it's with our partnership with ONS and the Office of Civic Organizing, whose entire mission is to go out and engage residents to participate with city government in civic life. And as we go through this process, we're moving on to the next stage. I won't spend a lot of time on the other milestones. Most of those are charter-driven milestones. And I will move into a little deeper dive on revenue. So in terms of the, I think it's been said many times, so we have healthy growth in this budget, almost 7%, 6.8%. $270 billion, that's a typo there. It's $270 million, sorry, but a full $1 billion budget. This growth is driven by property taxes, $135 million, and the recovery of the local economy. And that is the third bullet, other local revenue, so it's being led by growth in excises. Those are your hotel occupancy, your meals, jet fuel, all of those excises for being a city that's vibrant and has people coming to it and participating in it. State aid is challenging for the city. It's we are like all other municipalities. We get an allocation from the Commonwealth, but our assessments basically sort of consume most of that. So on a net basis, we're down year over year. And then the last bullet on here is the reduction in non-recurring revenue. So we have for many years used a piece of our fund balance to support the OPEB liability, sort of a voluntary requirement to pay into to acknowledge the responsibility to provide health insurance for retirees going forward. So ARPA was not used. We're in a good position to absorb that loss of revenue to move forward. In terms of the mix of general fund revenue. This is just another display of that has a pie and then a table to the right that talks about how, roughly 3/4 of our revenue source for the annual operating budget comes from property taxes. It's then followed by state aid, departmental revenue, excises. As you can see, that growth number in the table to the right, $103 million is a significant growth number, almost approaching 68% of the growth. So we're happy. We all lived through what happened to excises in FY21, where things were closed, things were not operating. So we're glad to be back in a position of growth in that. We'll go on to a little deeper dive on our largest revenue source, the property tax levy. So this shows over time, sort of the darker blue component is our base levy. We're allowed under the Proposition 2.5 state law to grow that levy by 2.5%. And we're also allowed to make an estimate of what our new growth is. So that's how it's played out over time. We've been the beneficiary of a lot of new growth in the city over the last few years. We're hoping that it continues and, in an appropriate. We understand there's lots of efforts to refine the planning process to make sure our development is effectively and appropriately managed. And then I won't spend too much time on the second largest source of revenue, which is state aid, and this sort of visually displays how, even though our revenue is marginally growing from the state, that the assessment growth sort of outweighs that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to walk us through some of the investments.
Great, thank you. So the budget we're presenting today is really focused on making investments in every generation, but while also making those intentional investments in the invisible things that make our city work better. So we've broadly defined some of our investments across these 4 categories that you see here: creating intergenerational opportunity, supporting a green and growing city, ensuring public health and community safety, and also delivering exceptional city services. Families are really at the heart of this year's budget. Included in this budget, we have included a new $4 million investment to support universal pre-K, which we anticipate will add 350 seats across the city. These funds will also support family and community-based pre-K centers and ensure that teachers are paid and trained appropriately. The Boston Public Schools budget, which you will hear more about later in this process, includes a $26 million investment to deliver on educational equity and excellence. This includes $9.6 million for a multi-year effort to promote inclusive educational practices, a $6.3 million investment for multilingual programming, and a $3.5 million investment for equitable literacy. In addition to that, this budget includes $500,000 to enhance and deliver on youth swimming lessons, which will ensure citywide accessibility. Between BCYF and Age Strong, the budget includes a combined $900,000 investment to add senior-oriented program at BCYF centers across the city. And the budget also includes an investment to expand hours at the branch libraries across the city, ensuring that most branches will be open from 9 to 5 on Saturdays, as well as later hours during the week. And in addition to these investments, there's also a $500,000 investment to support programs to train Bostonians for jobs in our growing life sciences sector. To ensure that we have healthy and green and growing cities, a few investments included in this budget include $750,000 investment in the city's green infrastructure, which will help support replacement of pavement with plantings. We've also included new resources in this budget to support the newly announced Planning Advisory Council, which will be charged with ensuring that our planning processes are comprehensive and include environmental justice and principles at their core. We've included new staff in the Office of Supplier Diversity to help grow capacity around minority and women-owned business enterprises across the city and increase the ability for those businesses to do business with the city. We've made some significant investments in housing, $5 million across a couple of key programs, including expanding our voucher program, expanding rental relief, and expanding the city's accessory dwelling unit, or ADU program. Let's see, we've also added additional capacity in our Parks Department for project management, which will help us to deliver on those projects that you will see later on in our capital plan. And last but not least in this category, the budget includes an additional $550,000 investment to support 10,000 $5 Blue Bike passes to help expand accessibility and promote mode shift across the city. In the area of public health and community safety, the budget includes over $3 million in the Boston Public Health Commission to help maintain the low threshold sites that were open in the city. In our emergency in EMS, which is part of BPHC, we've included funding for additional uniformed and administrative personnel within the department or within EMS to support operations and maintain emergency call response times. The budget also includes an investment to expand the Youth Connect program in the Boston Police Department, which empowers social workers in police stations to connect with youth, to services and support. We've also included expanded funds for trauma response at BPHC. And lastly, the budget includes a $1.2 million investment in violence prevention programming and staffing at Boston Housing Authority sites. And then in the area of expanding and improving constituent services, the budget includes additional resources to add positions that will make event permitting easier and more understandable. We have included what we're calling concierge positions that will walk residents through the event process and really just facilitate new ways for communities to be connected. We have included staffing in some of our core constituent services departments, such as the registry and the inspectional services department, to really make sure that there are sufficient resources there to serve the public. We've also added 2 new pathways in our city academy, which create a pipeline to needed city jobs in the area of bus drivers and wastewater management. We've added capacity in both public facilities and property management to help really support and maintain existing and new city buildings to make sure that we are maintaining them properly. And then last but not least, we have added language capacity in a few key departments, the Disabilities Commission and Emergency Services, sorry, got cut off there, to ensure that residents have access to critical information that are being shared by those departments. So that is a very brief and high-level overview of some of the things that we are doing in this budget. Like I said, the focus of this budget is really about creating intergenerational opportunity and getting at those invisible things that make our city work. So we are looking forward to the questions and the continued conversation. And with that, we will happily take questions.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Jim. I'll go to my colleagues first, and whatever questions that I have, my 200 list on my list, I will just cross them out and then do my questions last. In the order of arrival, we'll go to Council President Flynn. You have the floor for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the administration team for that informative presentation. As we see the slowdown in development, construction, and in the economy, we also see downtown offices remaining vacant, not only in the downtown area, but other areas of the city, still not getting workers into the downtown, into the financial area as much as we should. What impact will that have on Boston's budget? Maybe not this year, but going forward.
Thank you for the question. So, of course, what's happening in our downtown is we're paying very close attention to. It's, you know, the lively, the activity and vibrancy of downtown is really critical to our economy. As you've seen, we are seeing some promising signs in some of our local receipts, like excise and hotel. So there is evidence to show that we are seeing a rebound in our economy. That being said, if you walk outside, you can kind of see, you know, particularly on certain days, it's quieter than it probably was before COVID. That being said, you know, we the nature of the city's property tax is such that it is quite stable and it is able to grow. So we don't expect that continued vacancy would cause our revenues to fall off a cliff. As you saw, we are budgeting for growth both in our baseline property tax as well as some assumption for new growth as well. So we do not anticipate that there will be a significant impact on our revenue next year. That being said, we are looking very carefully to what are those indicators that would indicate that there's a problem. But right now, given both sort of the nature of the tax structure and what we're seeing in some of our other local receipts, we don't anticipate that there will be a major impact to our revenue.
Thank you. What type of support are we providing those in the construction field as a city? What type of support are we providing them, knowing that we have a slowdown in development and construction? What is the city doing to ensure that construction takes place so that we're able to pay our bills? That's an important part of our economy. Get our workers back to work, engaging in the building trades, providing good careers and jobs. But what are we doing in terms of working with the business community and with labor to make sure that they know exactly what's taking place now, but what are we expecting of them as we go forward?
No, in terms of where the resources we are, so it's mostly within the Office of Workforce Development that probably has the closest ties to the construction industry, and we've come off a period of significant growth. So the labor unions were fairly, you know, they were looking for employees. So, but the city will continue to support probably more in Chief Idalu's cabinet and in the planning and development will continue to support you know, appropriate growth. I think part of the city's capital plan supports that as well. You know, the city is continuing to make that commitment to continue to employ labor to execute and deliver on that capital plan.
If we don't see the construction fields coming back as strong as we anticipate, and workers still don't go to the downtown area consistently to work, and remote learning continues to take place, is there the likelihood that we're going to see a significant rise in property taxes for residents?
That is something that people are watching. So one of the classification is a process by which the City Council allocates the tax burden more heavily on the commercial industrial sector. So if the values were to somehow, but I think there's an approach to maintain those commercial values through investments in if office space is not as strong, lab space, but also there is a phenomenon that some of the higher end office space seems to be what's still desirable, and we're hoping that also that maybe the city will attract other tenants into other office space, and they're exploring. I think that Chief Jemison, the city's central planner, and Chief Ido will probably speak more eloquently on that subject than I, but I think there are efforts to strategically approach that issue.
Have we ruled out going back up to the State House at all in seeking additional?
I forgot to change my ringtone. Council Flynn, final 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay. Are we looking at any other revenue options going back up to the State House to deal with some of the challenges we might have going forward? Are we seeking new taxes? Are we going to consider new taxes that we need approval from the State House on?
So, presently the major revenue item we have pending in the state legislature is the transfer fee, which is dedicated. I think at this time, we think our local revenues are sufficient to support at least the budget we've put forward today. Should the situation change, we would look at whatever options we think are necessary to support our budget going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President Friend. Council Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that overview. A lot of my questions, I feel, will be more specific to the departments. I'll ask a few. I know that when we have the departments in front of us, they'll be able to answer in more detail, but you added it in your overview, so I assume you do know some of the reason. The part, the 26 million BPS investment, is that part of the additional money that they're adding to their budget?
Yes.
And this is explaining, because okay. And this is where they're breaking down, because they're asking for an additional 26 million.
This is the sort of targeted investments within that they are focusing on inclusion, multi-year approach to inclusion, multiple language approaches. Yep.
Okay. No, okay, yep. As a special ed ESL inclusion teacher, I mean, I do see the value, but knowing that many of the, so that's conversation we definitely can have with BPS when they come in. Happy to see the swimming lessons and the senior programming. I know myself and many of my colleagues all last year were advocating for a lot of this, and actually, carved out some of our OPER money last year to make sure these things were happening. So happy to see that that's a value. On the 3.3 million added to the public health, when you mention critical low threshold sites, are you referring to the housing? And do you know if that means that specifically the roundhouse will stay open, or do they know which sites they're trying to keep open?
I think this resource is I believe that the roundhouse is sunsetting at some point, but I think they're working to find replacement housing for that, and this resource is to support that effort to continue
going forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something. And do you know if, because Youth Connect is wonderful, and I know at an event last year, they were highlighting many new social workers that were assigned to different police stations. Is the goal, or are we already at one social worker per police station yet? And is this investment to make sure we can get there, do you know?
This investment is to make sure that we get there in more of a full-time sort of approach.
Yeah, so it's not like part-time or sharing stations. There'll be like one full-time assigned to, okay. That's great. I think my last one is the expanded trauma response, Boston Public Health, and then also the violence prevention and safety, BHA. Do you know if that's going to be in the form of hiring city employees through the Boston Public Health Commission, or is this going to be a contracted out nonprofit that is paid to do these services? Do you know?
I believe it's through a third party that's providing that service.
So it's another investment. And do we have a dollar amount on the expanded trauma response capacity?
We do. I want to say that it's $200,000, but let me look.
So it's less than 1.5 million combined, if you combine the one.
Yeah, $200,000. It's actually 2 FTEs. I apologize. There are some public health employees.
But when we, the breakdown is there to see where it's going.
Yep.
But some will be nonprofits that are
Right.
hired. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a few questions. One is really just on the area of recruitment and retention. Like, I know that it's some of the sort of what I would call the coal-face workers in public works and parks and that it's been very difficult to recruit and retain some of the grades of staff that are at the lower paid end of the scale. I know we've managed to increase project managers, etc., and that's really encouraging. But we did budget last year for hookies, I think, and I don't know that we've been able to recruit any because we're offering a salary that's less than you can earn at Dunkin' Donuts. So I really wonder, are we making any headway on increasing the base salary on those sort of lower paid city workers?
In general, or just that specific class of?
In general, but you know, I'm really thinking about those sort of really essential workers in public works and parks, and you know, the folks that are on the ground doing the heavy lifting, physical work every day.
So, as you know, we are sort of nearly concluding our round of bargaining negotiations, which are backward-looking over the last 3 years and are looking forward. So to the extent that we're able to deal with those issues through those contract negotiations, we're dealing with those as they're coming up. A couple of things that are included in the budget, we have included a $100,000 investment within human resources focused on recruiting. So I know that's a very, not totally entirely what you were asking, but we do acknowledge that there are some job classes in our city that are difficult to recruit for. So we are making an intentional investment to get around that. And as far as the low wage workers, we are looking carefully internally and have added some resources within human resources to do to build out the class and compensation division within human resources so that they will have the capacity to do additional reviews of positions that are difficult to fill because of salary issues and whatnot. So we do know that that is an issue, and we have sort of to the extent that we are able to account for building out the infrastructure we need around that process, that we're able to look carefully and make those adjustments as we identify them.
And I'd also like to, mention municipal police would be in that bucket as well. Then in the property tax conversation, we're now up to 72.4% of revenue. That's where the revenue comes from to support a city budget. 10 years ago, we were very alarmed when it went up to 52%. So I'm hearing from elderly retired homeowners who live on a fixed income or maybe have just their social security and they maybe work a part-time job, and they have an income of sort of 25,000, sort of 18 to 25,000, and they're facing an increase of $400 a quarter for their real estate taxes, which I think they're really under duress in this situation, and I really wonder, we really need to get serious about trying to develop some other revenue streams to take some of the pressure. And I totally understand that the residential property tax is much less than the commercial because we're really at as low as we can go on that. But I think we have to sort of get creative about finding other revenue streams. And also I'm wondering about, in terms of obviously, payment in lieu of taxes is one particular bucket that we can go to, but that's a voluntary program. I'm wondering about just how are we doing in terms of fees and fines and collections and those sort of things? Is there money on the table in that particular sector?
So we have not put forward any fee package as part of this budget, but we continually, revisit it. There was a lot of interruptions associated with certain, like parking fines, but we do look at, and often the operating departments will give us feedback on how their fees are comparable to other municipal governments. So we still do very well with building permits. So I think we're definitely open to exploring that, but we want to be careful that these costs aren't ultimately passed on to residents.
And that the cost of collecting them is worth the effort,
Right.
if actually pays off.
Yep.
The other question I had was, the Age Strong, the 900K for senior-oriented BCYF program, does that also include the two independent, they're not in the BCYF, they're under sort of Age Strong, the Orient Heights, East Boston and the Veronica Smith in Brighton, are they going to get a slice of this pie?
I think this is in addition to those operational budgets that support those two.
Yeah, because programming, I think a lot of our elders coming out of COVID, that really had a detrimental effect on their mental health and connection to community. So I think money is well spent in that sector. The other question I had was with regard to public safety regarding Boston Housing Authority. We've been dealing with some incidents recently and working with the police department, the Boston Public Police, the police department, about incidents of trespassing and harassment at some of our senior housing. And it became apparent that the BHA really doesn't have a well-staffed security team, and that they really need to recruit more people. Is there money? Is this money? Is that been addressed in this budget?
It's part of that investment. So it'll be the Boston Housing Authority is sort of an independent quasi-organization. It'll be an agreement between the Human Service Cabinet and the Boston Housing Authority to do both a youth violence sort of approach proposal and augmented with some additional resources for the public safety unit at PHA. I think there's like 5 additional staffers in there.
Very good. Let's see what else. I think, how am I doing, Madam Chair, for time?
Your time's up.
There you go. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Bach, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Just a couple of revenue questions. One is, do we have the numbers yet on new growth, like kind of how we're trending relative to the 98 million that was in the budget for this year that we're still in? I know we won't have the final numbers for this year because we're still in it, but
I think we have the FY23 tax rate new growth number, and that was on the slide.
well, because the number on the slide is 98, but it's the budget number, not the actual.
So the FY24 is an estimate at this point and will be validated through the tax rate setting process for FY24.
But I'm asking about 23.
23, so we budgeted for 60 million of new growth, and the 98 represents actual. Yeah.
I thought it was 60. Yeah, okay. So that actually is an actual number.
Yes.
Right.
And are those other numbers on that actual numbers, or are they budget numbers?
They're
on that
all
second?
actual.
They're all
for
actuals. Okay.
The budget.
And then just BPHC, I always worry a little bit because, like, if you're on you guys have a chart of sort of what's growing, right? And I can't find it now. Yeah, okay, so on page 5, so public health is going up 6.1%, but as you noted, they've obviously got like the sort of benefits, pension stuff included in there. And so given that our global pensions pool is going up 10%, like I always wonder if because BPHC has all these fixed costs that we bundle in, whether they're getting any real increase. Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah, that is actually one of the maintenance process that we try to cover them on those pension and healthcare costs that are growing at a different percentage. And we recognize that fact.
So, but is the 6.1, like, do you have a sense of how much of that growth is covering them for that versus like growth in terms of actual like net new stuff for them?
Yeah, let's, I think we have an investment number for them, but I can get you that specific response.
Yeah, I just think because they're accounted differently, it's actually, I think it's very helpful for the council that in general, pensions and all are pulled out from department budgets because it helps us know what's really happening. But I feel like with BPHC, because it's bundled, they're sometimes
Right.
Get the short end of the stick. And yeah, I mean, mostly just really excited about a lot of these investments. Obviously, thank you for the money for the BHA. You know, I think, and all the housing money, the growth in the vouchers is fantastic. And I think you guys didn't land on it as much, but the additional folks on the green infrastructure side, I think is gonna be really important. Am I right? I haven't been able to kind of find it specifically in the budget book, but that you guys are putting some money into sort of containerization pilot stuff and sort of, you know, innovation on the zero waste side over in Public Works?
I'd have to check on the status of containerization, but I know there are definitely lots of different efforts on the zero waste approach.
Would love an update on that before Friday if possible. And then, and it's great to see more capital manager capacity in parks because we've got so many of these capital projects. I know we're talking about those later this evening, but that aren't moving just because of capacity. So that's awesome. Yeah, no, I think mainly on the revenue side, just, you know, continue to worry as everybody is about sort of where the Class C commercial stuff is going, and how we think about and sort of how we model for that. It's one of the reasons that I think the pilot piece that we were talking about on Friday is really important because if we do see a downturn in the Class C commercial building valuations, then we're going to need to pick up the slack somewhere. And as Councilor Braden said, it's not really going to be feasible to do that on residents. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Councilor Coletta?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for this presentation. I want to thank my colleagues for their questions too. Councilor Braden stole my thunder on the low wage minimum wage workers that we see every day doing incredible work, Public Works, Parks. My questions are, I believe it was $45 million to support fair wages. Do we have a percentage of what went to those workers, their grade level? I would just like to better understand, you know, what sort of raise that they're getting. I know that there's some certain contract negotiations happening, but. Yeah,
the $45 million is the growth in the reserve for collective bargaining, so it's sort of a holistic number for all of collective. So I think it's unique to the employee group. What exactly that, as Ashley talked about, the class and comp union is a lot of it's benchmarking it against like comparable positions across the marketplace. So I think it's very unique to the individual group. Okay, thank you. And a bunch of my questions are very specific to departments. I know that this is a general overview, so just going through the presentation, I'm excited to see a lot of investments, especially in multilingual programming. That's a huge thing for East Boston, so thank you for that. Of course, I'm always going to advocate for my district, and especially when it comes to the senior-oriented BCYF programming. This is something that my seniors in the North End at the Nazaro have been calling for many, many years. So would love to and look forward to diving into those details to see how they're getting those resources. What is how can we quantify what the cost is going to be for expanding weekly and Saturday library hours? Do we have a number for that? It just says that we're generally doing that, but what does that mean for FTEs and just general operating costs? I think it's like 12 FTEs associated with like $750,000, was it? And it mostly is a function of expanding those branch hours from closing at 2 to 5, adding 3 additional hours on Saturday, which seem to be the most impactful for residents. And you said 750,000? Yep. Okay. Yep. Just want to make sure I get that. Okay, thank you. And then, so supporting a green and growing economy, everybody knows that this is an issue near and dear to my heart. I love to see the 750,000 to replace the pavements with planting. This is something that I saw in New York City that was absolutely wonderful, and Councilor Bach mentioned
growing that at least operationally, so that's great. Can you also quantify what it means to embed environmental justice into planning? I know that the advisory council is ongoing, but what does that mean in terms of dollars if we're talking about our budget? Is that an extra FTE? Is that an additional task force? What does that actually mean?
Great question. So that is the staff support that will support that advisory council. So that translates into about 2 new FTE and a total investment of about $250,000 to account for staff salary as well as some non-personnel related costs to support that work.
Okay. And what department will they live in?
So it's
Is it
actually
going to be the cabinet?
the new planning department that we have proposed to create as part of this budget. It will be included in there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to housing. Excited to see the $5 million in the city's voucher program. I know it's an incredible program and has been really successful. There was talk about trying to get more staff into OHS, so this is the Office of Housing Stability. They go through I don't know how many cases, and I really look forward to getting them in here and digging deeper into these sort of numbers, but they are overwhelmed. There's so many people calling them because folks are getting evicted, they need help. And I was wondering if providing a lifeline through rental relief, is that direct money or is that going into the Office of Housing Stability for support systems?
That is sort of a continuation of federal resources that they're concerning will fall off. It's very much about maintaining people in their homes so they don't become homeless.
Okay. And do we know if there's additional capacity being given to OHS through this budget?
There are additional FTEs. Some of it is a shift of moving CDBG dollars into project-based and absorbing them on the operating dollars, but there are new FTEs, particularly around housing, a position associated with populations that may have unique sets of dynamics. So a housing specialist is going to work with age strong, with seniors, with veteran services, and also with LGBTQ populations. So coordinating those efforts. Some of those departments also have their own capacity for housing support as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that my time?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Council Coletta. Council Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the administration for this presentation. A lot of my colleagues have asked questions that I think are really aligned with the questions that I've had, that we have here on the council, but I want to commend the investment in universal pre-K of an additional $4 million. You may not be the right to ask, but do you know what would it take to make it truly universal? Like what level of investment we would be looking at?
It's kind of a shifting demographic, and we've now rolled in 3-year-olds to make this model. So this program is the third-party program. So I don't have a figure on it, but I will reach out to BPS, the early childhood groups, and our own early childhood to get you a better answer on that.
Yeah, through the chair, can we get an answer to that question and make sure that we have an idea of the dollar amount that it would cost to ensure?
Councilor Lujan, can you repeat the question?
So there's an additional $4 million in universal pre-K. My question was, how much would it take for us to guarantee universal pre-K for all of our? So I think part of the question is knowing the number of 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds in the city of Boston.
Thank you.
And then there's a question about some of the budget predictions. So for example, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, they use a lot of the requests that they make are based on the number of constituents that they project that they're going to be serving. But wondering if your office, if there's any oversight in what the predictive models are when departments say we're going to be serving this number of constituents. Do we take that face value? Is there any sort of dialogue or conversation there?
Well, I think we seek as much supporting documentation on whether it's populations or changes. So I believe Immigrant Advancement is one of the stronger departments on having a good pulse on that information. but it's not consistent, but we usually rely on those departments to sort of substantiate the need.
Okay. And a lot of these questions will be more specific for the departments once they get here, but I just want to, I believe several councilors have said this already, and I've stated this last year, in terms of the diversification of our revenue streams, are there ideas, are there things that we're thinking about, like when it comes to either optimization of fee collection? And of course, when we do this, we want to make sure that it's not falling on the backs of our residents who aren't able to pay, and that we are thinking about equity whenever we're talking about additional revenue streams. But are there ideas about optimizing or like land assessment or something that we're thinking about differently from property taxes to buttress our revenue streams with the understanding of what we're limited in terms of imposing additional taxes, which other cities are often able to do, but we could be more creative with what we define as a fee and potentially leaning into that a bit more. So just want to get a sense from you on if we're doing any work in that area.
In terms of, I think that's a completely valid concept, to sort of like maximization of your existing tools. So that is something we revisit, as are there ways that we can maximize existing fee structures and to capture all of the revenue that we can. But in terms of, we have not put forth any sort of new fees in here, but it probably is definitely a concerted effort to go back and revisit to make sure that are we maximizing the fees that we do have.
And I believe Councilor Braden may have asked this question, but I'm not sure if I fully heard the answer, and it might be slightly different. Do we look to other cities to see like what are they doing in terms of fee collection or building a revenue model that is less dependent on property taxes? Not saying that it's a good thing that we have these property taxes, but building systems that we have more of a diversification of our revenue sources.
Yeah, I think we're always, and I think that's one of the cabinet's effort is to do more of a long-term financial assessment of where we position ourselves longer term, but benchmarking ourselves against other cities. We don't, being in Massachusetts, municipalities are fairly controlled by the Commonwealth, and right down to our tax rate needs to be approved by the Department of Revenue. And your ability to to create new taxes has to go through a home rule.
Home rule, yes. I'm not suggesting, and I'm never suggesting that we benchmark ourselves to other cities, but I just do think that the idea exploration is good. Is that my time,
Yes.
Madam Chair? All right. Well, thank you. Excited about the investment in seniors, continuing the work of ARPA. Also, AAA bond rating. We have to use our fiscal strength. So excited to talk more about that.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. Councilor Baker?
Thank you. Can you talk about the new planning department? You're looking for that for July? To stand up a new planning department? Where does that sit? How much does it cost? We've already gone through all the employees. They know what's happening. They know what to expect.
So this is the creation of sort of the city version of, I know there's been hearings about like this larger planning consolidation efforts. This is an office created via the mayor's executive order, which takes the chief of planning, Arthur Jemerson, and he's the existing employee of this planning unit, and then builds some more capacity and helps support this new Planning Advisory Council, which are all.
Is it a planning advisory council or is it a planning department?
It's right now it's a planning department whose main goal is to sort of stand up the Planning Advisory Council.
And Arthur has two roles.
He's
the head of the BPDA and going to be the new head of the. So is he going to get two salaries?
No.
He should. He should. Yeah. Okay. Back to FY24 budget developed with the lens of equity, sustained service, and address long-standing pain points and makes critical investments. Can you tell me what that means?
I'm going to flip to the slide so I can
And
see.
like how much?
Yeah. So kind of taking it piece by piece. So
But I don't want to use all my time on you.
sure.
so-
Okay. So very quickly, I mean, in conversations we had with all of the city departments, like Jim was mentioning, discussions around equity was really critical to those conversations and making sure we had.
And what does equity mean?
What does equity mean?
What does equity mean?
It means making sure that our city resources are being spent equitable across our
What is
population.
equity? Being spent equitable. Tell me what equitable means.
Councilor Baker is serious about just whatever definition you can.
Yeah.
Sure. So
I'm not sure.
making
And
sure
like
that
pain points, things like that, it all
resources-
seems kind of pie in the sky.
Sure. Well, I think in terms of equity, making sure that resources are being appropriately allocated to populations that have been previously underserved or underinvested in. So I think that's how we were viewing equity and making sure that as we were making budget decisions, making sure we understood if there were going to be impacts on those populations.
Okay, thank you. The charter school, is the charter school is that in the public education budget of 1.7 billion?
Yes. Yep.
So is that the first year we included that this year?
No, it's just, we
We've
wanted
been
to
doing that.
acknowledge that's a cost that is for public education.
Okay. And the debt service is up 30 million? What is that?
That's our multi-year schedule of paying the debt for, we just closed on a.
Is that normal going up by like 30 a year? It's about
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. 68 million increase to support Boston Public Schools, is that regular business, or like how much is actually going? It's an increase every year by, say, 40 million or whatever, so what is there for actual classroom support and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, the investments are targeted at addressing those major sort of systemic issues that they're responding to.
Like teaching kids how to read,
Yep.
not graduating while they can't read?
Yep, exactly. So those are all, different approaches to making sure that students are in the most inclusive environment to learn, that multilingual approaches to education is focused on.
So with 68 million, how much is actually over and above regular operating expenses that's going into classrooms?
I would have to defer. I know that schools does that sort of, school versus
Okay,
non-school.
and you're talking about inclusive, and so is the Henderson gonna have investment here? Do we know that for sure, or that's a question for
Yeah,
the
I
school
would
department?
defer to BPS on that.
Okay, you had said in your budget process in January, first time you sat with departments? That doesn't seem right. Is this the first time, is you as a budget analyst, or wherever your jobs are, first time you're saying was this year you actually sat with departments and worked out budgets?
No, it was sort of probably the first time since the pandemic that we had this opportunity to sit down before the budget was due, to have these conversations, to say, what are your goals? So, the administration came in during, they have new leadership, they articulated their goals, their cabinet goals.
So you made it sound like
Thank
it's the
you.
first time you guys sit with
Yeah,
departments and
I
work.
apologize.
That was a mistake.
No,
That's your time.
Partnership, huh?
That's your time, Councilor Baker. Final question.
All right, let me get a good one then.
Okay.
$3.3 million added to low threshold, and you talked about that with Erin. So we're investing an additional $3.3 million in finding places for people when they leave the roundhouse. So the roundhouse is going away. The BMC has walked away from it. So that means we're going to take that high need, high risk population and start funneling them into neighborhoods. Where is that going to happen?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure on the specific logistics. I don't know if it's all been nailed down, but these resources are to make sure.
Well, what is the investment in the roundhouse up to now? What has the investment been over the years?
Thank you, Councilor
Yeah,
Baker.
it's been a mixture of ARPA dollars and other sides.
It's still money that could have gone other
Councilor Baker,
places.
that is your time. We'll come back to you shortly. Councilor Worrell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel. I have a few questions. Some of my questions have already been asked by my colleagues, and I know some of these questions are specific to each department, but one of the questions we ask every department is give us a breakdown of their department staffing. Will we be able to get that from you guys for like the whole city on the breakdown, demographics, and pay scale?
Yeah, there is, we've worked with the Department of Innovation and Technology. There are existing dashboards for that you can sort of filter, but we will, as part of the RFI that the chair has asked, provide that on a department-by-department basis too.
Thank you. And then, can you tell me the pre-COVID level amount of excise tax revenue? Just kind of want to get an idea of where we're at now compared to pre-COVID.
All right.
And then one of my final questions when you get that answer is, the senior-oriented programming, does this include transportation? Because I hear so much that we do have some programming, but sometimes, you know, our seniors live far away from the center. So do you know if that includes transportation?
No.
No.
I know there's an element to transportation for H Strong and their programming. I'd have to get to see if this investment contemplates more transportation associated with it.
All right, and then the pre-COVID level for excise.
So I think on the excise, we're finally, you know, coming back from the pre-COVID, which we would consider FY19 as sort of a pure pre-COVID year.
We can follow up with that
Okay.
number. Just looking at the budget summary that's in the budget document, which goes back to fiscal 21, what we had collected for actuals in fiscal 21 was about 95 million, and the budget for 24 assumes about 254 million, so pretty significant rebound, but I'm sure if you looked back to a few more years back, it would also be pretty stark. So we'll follow up with the information back to 19.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Rao. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It is budget season. Ooh, no. Here we go. I just have a few questions.
You're the only one celebrating. Okay.
Well, I'm celebrating now, and then I'm just going to change my attitude later. But for now, I'm here for it. I just have some just some clarity, if you will. So, in regards to the equitable literacy component, a few years ago we established a literacy task force, and I see that you have $3.5 million going towards literacy efforts. I'm curious if that's going to include adult literacy issues that we, you know, with our returning citizens who are struggling to read and write, our recent arrivals who come here with interrupted education. When I think about literacy, I just don't think about, you know, in our Boston Public Schools, while we also know that the school to prison pipeline is an issue when we're thinking about literacy. So can you just confirm for me, when you're saying investments in $3.5 million, how much of that is going towards intergenerational literacy efforts?
It is a Boston Public Schools investment, so it's going to be focused around the students. There may be a parent component to that will have an adult literacy component to it, but it's geared towards the students.
Right, so then, so if I'm hearing you correctly, there's not going to be any financial investments made for our returning citizens or those who have interrupted education? Just
well,
curious.
Interrupted education is a
For immigrants, like recent arrivals?
Right, exactly. For students who had interrupted education, I think they refer to the term as SLIFE, where they need to catch folks up who have not been in school.
So for those who are listening, because you know all the departments are listening, Chantel included and Neil, I just want to note for the record that when I think about literacy here in the city of Boston, the last time there was a study done was 2003. So we're long overdue to really assess the literacy rates here in the city of Boston, and I think that an investment in really getting some grounding on that with a special interest in our returning citizens, I think is worth looking into. I have a question about the inclusive educational practices. You know, over the last year or two, or since I've been on the council, we've been fighting for exponential learning investments, learn to earn, and I'm just curious, when we're talking about inclusive educational practices, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's basically approaching the way they have students, so instead of students necessarily getting an IEP and moving into like a
Oh, okay,
separate
so it's inclusion.
Yeah, inclusion.
Okay, not inclusive. Okay, all right, well then, thank you for that clarification. While on that note, though, I do think that we need to invest in more exponential learning, career exploration opportunities, which I know that there was an investment made, an announcement earlier this year, but I just think more of that is what this moment is calling for. I'm curious about the City Academy. I'm excited, and I've been working with the Neighborhoods Jobs Trust and other folks around workforce development issues. And one of the things that, while I do appreciate parks and other departments, I have been asking for other types of employment opportunities that we see our city residents as viable candidates to work inside our offices and other departments. So I just want to push you all to think and expand that a little bit further. Library hours, there's not a dollar amount, so I'm just curious, are you guys thinking about putting a dollar amount there? Do you have a game plan for where and all that good stuff?
Yep, I think it's almost every branch is $750,000, 12 FTEs.
Okay, great. And then for the supplier and diversity portal, I do appreciate the investments there. I'm just curious, I would like to see more investments around accountability, not just helping people navigate the process, but I think that there needs to be some sort of mechanism in place to hold us accountable to that. So I just kind of want to note that I appreciate the investment, but I think that there needs to be some sort of tracking mechanism for accountability in that line item. And then the last thing that I will ask you all is when we're thinking about processes, and I'm really happy to see that, we have gone through a number of different ways on how we approve this budget. Can you just talk to me a little bit about how participatory budget is going to influence your decision-making processes, as well as the city council, kind of what your vision is for that?
And by participatory budgeting, do you mean the new office that will be created?
Yes.
Yeah, so as you know, we went through and approved that office. We passed that, the council approved and passed the ordinance to create that Office of Participatory Budgeting. So, which is great, because that gave us the opportunity to get started on that work. So we're in the process now of actually building out that office. So as we were developing that ordinance and working closely with the advocates, I think it was, given the time it was taking to set things up, expected that process would really kind of start over the summer. So I'm not, I don't think the infrastructure will be in place to necessarily impact the budget that we're talking about today, but with, the expectation that, the investment that's included in here, that those funds will be available for the participatory budgeting process to review, go through their process once that's established, so that it will impact and then be a part of our budget going forward.
Thank you. Councilor Lara, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. Because this is just a general overview, I'm not going to ask any questions about the specific investments, but I do have questions about the revenue, just for my own understanding. Can you, for the record, share with us how you're calculating the cost of property taxes?
So the property taxes, so we have the existing levy that goes through a whole valuation process and is certified by the Department of Revenue at the state. Yep. We're allowed to add 2.5% on top of that levy.
Say that one more time.
2.5%.
2.5%.
You're allowed to grow under the state statute, grow your levy by 2.5%. And then
do we meet that? Do we go to that 2.5% every year?
We do.
Great.
We do. And then what is allowed in addition to your 2.5% is what you can estimate for new growth.
Okay, thank you so much. What about state aid? What is your understanding about how the state calculates the aid that comes to the city of Boston?
It's different. There's general government aid. They refer to it as unrestricted general government aid. ARGA has a formula
at the state's budget.
Yep,
and they have a formula that they use for that. Do you know what that formula is?
Yeah, it's based on a revenue consensus model. I don't know. Ashley has some experience at the state. I don't know if she probably.
Yeah, so I can't remember the formula for UGA, if there even was one, but I know that the other big input into state aid is Chapter 70 aid, which is a very complex formula that is based on many factors about a city, so that is a large formula. So I think for purposes of this budget, we have included the state aid assumption that was part of the governor's budget that came out in March. As you know, we got the House Ways and Means budget a few weeks ago, and then we will look forward to the state. And so we will, as we march through, kind of get continuous updates on the various levels of state aid that will be in each of the budgets and ultimately decided in the final budget, but the budget we've presented takes the governor's amount into account.
Okay, and do you typically see that there's a growth from the presented budget and the amount of state aid that comes into the city by the end of it? Does it usually grow? Does it get less? Are we to expect?
Well, we were the beneficiary of it growing in last budget year.
Yes, I see. But it's also been going down significantly.
Yes.
So what is the story that you would tell about?
The story we heard in the House is that on a net basis, it's actually down from the governor's budget. So it's something we have to pay attention to and advocate for.
Okay. And so are we expecting that the final budget will have an increase or a decrease to the number that we're currently using?
I think we're cautiously optimistic that it will have growth in it.
Okay, thank you. And for the departmental revenue, which departments, do you know do you have an exhaustive list of the departments that are bringing in revenue to the city?
Yes, so there is revenue accounts that are often organized around departments. So department, or like parking fines are in the transportation department, building permits are from ISD. There is in volume 1 of the budget document has like a table of all of the various revenue accounts associated.
The book that we've just received today.
Right. Well, I think you actually got a PDF version of it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So, sorry, everybody's very excited about the books. Okay, that's great. Can I, through the chair, make a request for an exhaustive list of the departments and how much revenue they bring in and where that revenue comes from?
Absolutely.
You said that it was in the book. Does the book have all those details?
It does have department revenue detail.
Let me pause your time for a second. Jim, can you please provide the digital
Sure.
spreadsheet with that, please? Thank you. And
Thank
just
you,
the
'cause-
comparison as well from last year.
Sure.
Thank you.
Because my worry is that the revenue will be in each separate department, and I would like to see a collective list of, do you see what I mean? So I'm sure that it's in the budget, but it will be like this revenue per department on the department page. So if I would like a list of just the departments and the revenue that are coming in.
Yeah, although we track it by department, it's general fund revenue. All of the revenue goes in is used for general government operations.
Thank you. I want to I want to compare and see what's happening. I think that's all I have. What about excises?
I think that's a good news story. We're seeing
Yes.
rebounding from that. We're assuming FY21 was a low water mark, and we're looking for growth.
Okay, yeah, that's the same thing with the departmental revenue. If we're seeing almost a 24% increase, that's kind of why I want to see where the revenue, where the changes are. Those are all my general questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I think without exhausting the time, I just want to bring to your attention for all my council colleagues, firstly, that the capital overview hearing will be today in community at 5:30, and that I have requested that departments show up to that hearing. And just for the folks at home, I want to make sure that folks know that I have invited the chiefs of departments to show up, and looking forward to seeing them there today. So obviously Jim and Chief Grafenberger from OBM, the Parks Department, Chief Mariama White Hammond was invited, Chief of Streets, Yasha Franklin Hodge, thank you. Office of Equity and Inclusion, Chief, Solis Cervera, and Boston Public Schools, the Superintendent Skipper, and I did invite the Office of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion. Chief Idowu has a major conflict with something with family, and will not be able to make it. But this will be at the 12th Baptist Church this afternoon at 5:30, again at 160 Warren Street in Roxbury. In terms of the questions that were submitted, again, I don't want to exhaust the time. I just want to go back to my colleagues, because I think that for For myself, I have more of the breakdown of the budget, so the answers are in the breakdown. But I do want to bring attention to the RFI. So for those at home, we call it RFI, an acronym for Request for Information. And there are 3 pages of questions that myself as the chair submit to each department. These were agreed on or sent to the departments about 4 weeks ago. Each department will have to bring the answers to the hearing that are scheduled. You can find a schedule online. You can also email me directly or email the budget. On the budget website, you can find the email that I've already listed for you to get these lists. And happy to email them to you as well for your reference. Your presentation does not specifically answer all of the questions on the RFI, and unfortunately, because of the format, we don't have the time. I'm asking that you take the RFI and you treat it, you know, sort of like a quiz, 1 through whatever, 45, with its parts, and answer them one by one, please. If they don't apply, that you just specify and why they don't apply. If you can send it to my office or Ways and Means Liaison, Shane Pack, as well to Karishma, our budget and analyst, as well to all of my council colleagues, so that we have proper responses in order for us to move in with our amendment process. So I do have some questions for you in terms of the reductions, I guess, you know, and how that impacts departments. What are the largest reductions in the budget, and what drove you to that decision?
Reductions in accounts or
Allocations?
Departmental allocations?
Yes.
Yeah, there's mostly just a handful of departments that might have gone down. Some of it is a function of, like Ashley's department, for example, it's going down, but it's really a function of a transfer of staff to another operational unit, so it's not a real reduction. Some of them are just corrections for costs, as they may not have been fully flushed out, and they were sort of chewed up a little bit. Sometimes smaller departments, it's a function of the staff in there, and you know what is the salary requirements for the next group of staff. So we can get you a table of all of the reductions. Yep.
That would be fantastic.
Yep.
With its explanation, even if it's just a brief sentence. And as far as the RFI responses, could you give me a timeline to when you can get back to me with the responses?
Now, the RFI, are you looking for each individual department, or?
No, just for overall.
Overview? Yeah, we will, I think we can work on doing that probably by the end of the week, I think, sure.
Okay, so 7 days' time to get responses. I'm going to be doing this with each department and hopefully get them before our working sessions. Thank you. So a lot of my questions are for individual departments. Again, I'll yield my time and we'll move on. And I do have like many questions. So I'm just weary of my colleagues' time. So we'll go back to them, and I'll put my stuff in writing. I'll add it to the RFI, send it to you. And I think that that will probably be the best use of our time today. Going back to council colleagues, Council President Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, want to say thank you to you, Madam Chair, for the important work and leadership you're providing, along with the staff and budget team here from Mayor Wu's administration. And thank you for providing some excellent information on this budget. Jim, what's one of the issues myself and my colleagues have been focused on is pest control and what we're doing about pest control in the city of Boston. I actually think we need to have a dedicated team, a dedicated department that really deals with pest control, centralize, coordinate this public safety and public health issue. Can you give me a rundown of what we're doing on pest control?
So when I think of pest control, I think of some of the like proactive steps that the inspection services does, where they do, baiting and control efforts under the auspices of sort of health. But I think there is pest control also improper, is tied to maybe the code enforcement division that sits in the Public Works Department, where they're monitoring the disposal, the storage of waste products to prevent additional rodent problems. So it's we can provide more detail associated with that, but it's those are like the main areas where I think of when I think of pest control.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe offline, if someone can reach out and provide some information to me. I would really like to see a dedicated, designated city department that specifically deals with pest control, coordinating how we deal with this public health issue. It's literally an issue that impacts almost every district, every neighborhood in the city. So I'd be interested in getting some information on that. I don't necessarily have any more questions at this time. I'll wait for another opportunity. But again, just want to say thank you to the chair and thank you to the mayor's budget team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor President Flynn. Councilor Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I did see our bounded books came, so thank you there.
Yes,
in our offices.
I just got a report of that.
So I was going to carry them out, but I didn't want my colleagues to be jealous that I went in my office and saw them, yeah. So thank you for that. I know that when we have different departments in front of us, we can really ask more specific, but I did, and I spoke with you before also, and I've said it time and time again here on the council floor, an increased investment in our BPS athletics, but also a robust and equitable, and by equitable I mean every school is offering the same across the system with before and after school programming for our students, that wraparound services that are needed. And it's not anything that they pulled out as showing that they were increasing the budget to spend on. Do you know how those conversations went, or if you were part of those conversations that were not really valuing those things that I had spoke about?
So I think schools are probably the best equipped to respond to that, but in terms of trying to I've heard the superintendent say that they're trying to have every students have a continuity and in their experience. Obviously, sometimes it takes more resources with certain students than others. That's completely, that is the definition of equity.
Yeah, I mean though with the not equitable learning, because I understand what equitable literacy is, I taught it. It's the before and after school programming and the athletics, which is above and beyond the academic day for our students. Like our schools offering across the board, sports teams and theater and arts, all of this that ties into the social and emotional wellness and mental health of our students and staff and school culture.
I'll have to
okay.
tag that.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few more questions. Back to state aid, I'm just curious about whether our census undercount impacted our state aid, or does that really just impact federal funds?
I don't think there's a huge census component other than in Chapter 70, it's a function of your enrollment. But general census, I don't think is a
very good. Yeah, we just need to make sure we fund our census next time. Get a better count next time round. Let's see. Also, bringing back to sort of the issue about our retirees and COLA. are we on a trajectory to raise the COLA base from 15K to 18K like some of other municipalities in Massachusetts?
It's an active and open conversation that we're having right now, and the retirement board will be taking that up. The budget assumes sort of no change until that change is taken by the retirement board. But yes, it is a conversation. But of course, we are very nearly fully funded in our pension. We expect to be fully funded by 2027. So, with compressed runway to absorb any sort of significant changes like that, it would either have the impact of extending our schedule or making our annual contributions significantly higher than they are. So any conversations we have about that, we're very carefully understanding the impact it would have on our funding schedule.
Yeah. As is mentioned earlier about cost of housing and cost of living in Boston, our retirees, city employees who are retired, are finding it increasingly difficult to survive in the city on their limited fixed income.
Yeah.
So anything we can do, I know it's an aspiration to lift it, but we just gradually keep our foot to the pedal on that one.
And just as you know, a couple of weeks ago, the mayor had introduced and the council passed a one-time increase of the COLA for this year up to 5%. So in sort of acknowledgement of this very acute high inflationary moment, we did take action to increase that for this year as well. So
very good.
Point well taken.
The Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, does that include funding for ESOL classes that are for our immigrant community? I think we get incredible bang for our buck out of a modest investment in that space, and we see the benefits to our parents of our who don't necessarily speak English in terms of their being able to advocate for their kids in school and to improve their business operations because they're better able to reach their customers. I advocate for this every year. Are we putting some money in the kitty for that?
Yes, well, the Boston Public Library has an investment to expand their multilingual approach, including ESOL programming.
So, but this particular one, I think they work in partnership with English for New Bostonians, and they do classes in some of our hub schools in the city. Like it's after school parents and community members who are in that school community. I'd
have to check on that.
Yeah, very good. Then I'm also checking in on the progress on the best clinicians in the police department. Do we have a best clinician attached to every district, police district at this point?
I think we're at there's like 18 or so best clinicians. I don't know if that covers every single district at this point, but I can check on that.
Yeah, because I know when I check in with our local district about 911 calls, and they say a huge number of their calls, like the majority of their calls, are related to some sort of a mental health crisis. Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a couple more questions, but I can, the other one was BTD. And
Thank you, Council Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Council Bach?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to use my time to say thank you to the budget team, Ashley and Jim, and I see Joanna over there and Jack. But I also thought that I might just read the names from the front of the book of the budget analysts who work in the office, because one of the things that I've learned over these years is that, before the council gets to acid test these things, it's really the budget analysts who are working behind the scenes with each of the departments really asking, well, what do you need? And can you do that with your existing resources? And really kind of testing things. And you're not here in front of us, but it's an incredible core of folks, and just really grateful for all of their work. So just wanted to say thanks to Stephen Brendel, Harry Dim, Ian Donnelly, Maggie Friel, Grant Holland, Eric Kaplan, Aaron Mooney, Ben McNeil, Kevin Monahan, Rashad Morrison, Joseph Morrissey, Daniel Nabby, John O'Brien, Todd Swisher, who's been very helpful to me on revenue model stuff in the past, Eliza Salmon, and then Mohammed Udin, who has gotten deep into our street lighting challenges in District 8, along with from central staff Connor Kenny, Crystal Galotto, Joanne Olivares, and then Ellen Hatch, Gail Hackett, and Sonia Harris for all they do. So I just wanted to say that thank you, because it's this invisible team, and the council's about to spend a lot of time going through that 3-volume book, but there's a ton of work that goes into putting it together, and just really grateful for all of the collaboration with me in the past, with the chair now, with us in ARPA last year. I think really just have appreciated the budget team in all of its iterations. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, for doing that. I really appreciate that. And I think the team is one of the best in city government. So much so that sometimes we find alumni in the budget office in departments scattered across the city because they're such a good resource and have some deep knowledge of city operations. So I appreciate you doing that, and they are really on the ground in communication daily with these departments, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Thanks, Jim. With that in mind, thank you to our new budget analyst, Karishma, who has been amazing in putting together, yes, absolutely stealing your thunder here, Councilor Bach, but she is amazing and has been working swiftly to get us all that we need in breakdowns, and you'll see that for every hearing, you will have breakdowns, visual data visualizations, and comparisons through the year, comparisons by department, comparisons with revenue sources. So she's, and it gets deeper than that. For some of you, you know that I get really technical, so she's been able to do all of that in all sorts of levels. You're going to be fascinated and absolutely fall in love with budget process this year. So next, Councillor Louis-Jean, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question in this, and I think I have 3 or 4. Now that the City Council 1 and FOB 4 under the leadership of Madam Chair, our own budget analyst, what about your practices and your engagement with the City Council has changed as a result of us having someone squarely in this position?
No, I think it's fantastic that the City Council is building that capacity. And one of the things that we are in deep partnership with the City Council. We talk about, the fiscal conditions of the city. The City Council is part and parcel of that, making sure that we're making the right decisions, fiscally prudent positions. So I think we look forward to we've had an existing relationship with Michelle and Shane, and looking forward to working with Karishma in the team, in the chair.
Thank you, especially as Council has more powers, just increasing in data sharing and models. I think it's going to be really important for us to be able to execute on this important duty of ours. I'm also, I know that your office in partnership with Chief Lawrence is working on a report for low-wage workers, and I just want to thank you for that. Hopefully we will be able to have a conversation about establishing, but what it would take or what it look like to establish a municipal minimum wage so that the City of Boston can really be an example for employers in the city when it comes to what we deem acceptable to pay our lowest wage workers. So I know that the report, working with Councilor Bach, that the report is due July 1, but we're going to see if we can get data as soon as possible, beginning June 1, so that could really help inform how we advocate for that here. An additional question I have is, in ESSER, we're looking for, the city is looking for how do we continue to fund these investments that have been historic investments once we no longer have the funding. And I'm wondering if on the ARPA end, if we're looking at something similar, we were able to make very, very incredible historic investments, especially when it comes to housing via our ARPA dollars. I think about the Acquisition Opportunity Program, which allows, helps nonprofit developers buy buildings that have tenants in them to really prevent and work against displacement. I think one of the best anti-displacement tools there is that we have in the city, historic investments in community land trust. How are we thinking about continuing these investments in these programs that are stabilizing for our communities after the opera dollars aren't there?
I'm happy to answer that, Counselor. So ARPA was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us, and we were lucky here in Boston that we didn't experience the revenue hole that other cities did, and so we were able to take that money and invest it in many of the things that you just described. I think we're by design, it was, the investments were intended to not create ongoing operating expenses for us, but as you mentioned, there are a lot of really impactful things that the city would be looking to continue. So I think, in our housing investment here in the $5 million we included in the operating budget for some of our housing investments sort of seeks to continue some of those one-time things that we were able to do through ARPA. But I think going forward, we are hopeful to start to engage in much longer term financial planning here in the city, going out a few additional years, so that we're able to see where those cliffs are, to the extent that they exist, and then we all can make informed decisions about what it makes sense to continue and sort of what the trade-off would be of continuing some of these really robust programs that we set up under ARPA. Unfortunately would come at a trade-off to other things we're able to do. So I think, identifying what are the most critical things to continue in the very short term, but having a long-term view to make sure that we are identifying those things early and can make those adjustments as needed.
Thank you. It's just in the same way that we're thinking about soft landings for the programs. I think we need to be thinking about that here. So I'm glad to hear that there's going to be that thinking as well. And then I think this is related, and it goes back to what I was trying to say at the end, trying to talk more time than my chair gave me. But again, one of the things that I think we can be doing in the city is we do have this AAA bond rating, this fiscal strength that is a resource that we can lean into and tap into more. So can you talk a little bit about how that AAA bond rating, and maybe explain for the folks at home who may not be aware, how we can lean into that to do or pick up some of the work that we started with ARPA?
Yeah, absolutely. So
thank you, Madam Chair.
You'll hear in our capital presentation tonight that it assumes a level of borrowing that we could only really assume if we had that top credit rating. And so Councilor Baker pointed out that our debt service costs were growing, significantly in this budget. If we didn't have that AAA bond rating, our debt service costs would be even greater than that.
What is the debt service cost what is it?
It's about $250 million a year, I believe,
okay.
Or assumed.
But as a percentage of the budget?
It's roughly, I think together, it's like 20% or so. Yeah.
So were it not for that significant, top credit rating, we would be paying a lot more in interest costs, which would limit our ability to do other things. You would see, an inability to put a significant investment in some of these sort of discretionary expenditures that we've presented for you today. So I think that low cost of capital allows us to borrow as much as we're responsibly able to at the lowest cost, and that allows us to build out our infrastructure most affordably, but also give us space to do other things in our operating budget.
But just a point of clarification, so that the debt service, one of the fiscal policies associated is that debt service should stay within 7%.
Right now,
Thank you.
Last year. Okay. Apologies. Thank you. And thank you for the answers. We'll delve more into this. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. Councilor Baker, you have the floor.
Thank you. It says the debt service is at 13.8.
That's the growth number.
The growth number, okay, thank you. Ashley, you had talked about robust programs. Is that like the free tea and that, like robust programs that we invested in ARPA?
From ARPA.
Is that the tea program and then different housing things we did? Can you name some of those we're talking about?
Sure. I mean, just off the top of my head, there was over nearly $300 million put into various housing programs. I think the Fare Free tea was part of that as well. Oh my gosh.
So we're going to take that on as a liability, the Fare Free tea?
So right now, the budget before you today does not assume any additional funding.
Because it was 3 years, so I think we're on our third year now.
Yeah, I think we recovered through FY24 for sure.
2024, so that's done in June?
Nope.
Or through next year?
Yeah, through
so
next year.
we're planning on taking that on as a liability in 25?
I think that would have to be a discussion as part of the fiscal 25, and I know there's other discussions with the state about, options there. So that would be a choice for the mayor and the council to make in the upcoming budget.
And last year in ARPA and also regular business, we put about 500 million into affordable housing. You're telling me there's nothing there that we could give to the homeowner, the retired homeowner, but Nine had talked about it for a while there, the retired homeowner that's at their margins. We can't go into that 500 million and figure anything out there, 200 a month for people that ask. That needs to be legislated.
Well, so just kind of speaking to the ability to do that, I mean, I think we would be sensitive to setting up sort of an ongoing expectation of a subsidy to a homeowner, to help offset.
Well, we do that ongoing with the voucher program. We've gone from 5 million to 10 million now. So that's an ongoing liability for rental programs. We're talking about people that are longtime homeowners in their homes. I mean, some people 50, 60 years, and we don't have anything for them. And we've established that they pay 3/4 of this budget here. The homeowners, the people that own property. What are we doing for them?
I think that would be, there are limitations to what we have.
So why can we so easily just come up with a voucher program to hand out?
Councilor Baker, allow him to finish answering. I'll give you more time.
Well, the city-funded voucher program, it was an existing model that
I know, I was part of it.
So because property taxes are like the baseline component of every municipality in the Commonwealth, that would have ramifications for a lot of folks. So
I understand the ramifications, Jim, but what I'm saying is we have longtime people here that need help, that are in their homes, that know they're never going to get the help. Let's move on to something else. Robust programs you went into. The City Academy, you have two new pathways, buses and wastewater. Are the buses for us, are they for school bus drivers?
They are.
School bus drivers. And the wastewater are going to be for Boston Water and Sewer?
Yes.
Basically?
Right.
Okay, good. How many people do we have going through those two? They haven't been set up yet. Any projections on what we're talking about?
I don't have a specific counts on the number of.
Okay, and I've heard over and over about investments in simplifying the event permitting process. What's the problem with the event permitting process?
I think it's for folks who are sort of novices, and it's a lot of steps, a lot of things you have to go through, and this is sort of to help people. The average block party, that type of thing, to make it a little easier, consumable, help them through that process.
And so what does that investment look like? Like you talked about the concierge, how many positions there, and what do those people do?
It's in the arts and culture department. And these are new.
So is that special events going in with arts and culture or staying with licensing?
So I think there's a person that will stay in licensing, but there are also staff in special events, and these two permanent positions are in arts and culture. There's 2 FTEs, someone who's trying to reform, improve the process, and one that sort of is more of a citizen-facing.
New hires coming in, the concierge?
Yes.
So the concierge is going to be someone that's going to improve that process, brand new here?
Yes. Yep.
Interesting. Has there been any talks about buyouts? Jim, you've been here a while. We've had multiple buyouts over the years. Again, we've established, how much did we get in ARPA? $1 billion?
ARPA?
ARPA.
It was 500?
Yeah, 500.
We only get 500 over the whole time. What did the school department get?
I think it was 400, and yeah.
You sure? So 900 together. Have we started talking about, is there any discussion at all around buyouts for people that have been around here for years that could maybe get an extra year?
Well, I think in terms of early retirement options, those are, obviously the fiscal impacts are significant, but that would require that a home rule will be filed with the Commonwealth.
Is there any discussion within your department and with this administration about buyouts and how we take care of people that were the security guards? Everybody talks about how much they love the security guards and we're going to get them a raise. We're giving them awards and whatnot. They're not getting any raise. What about those people that have been coming in here during ARPA when you and I are home in our feeties? They're coming in every day, and we're still paying them less than what you can get at Longwood. When is that going to be addressed? We blew through all this money. It's all gone. We got $500 million. What went to the workers? Did any money go towards enhancing worker benefit?
Well, I think to the extent that revenue replacement was part of the last 2 fiscal years' budget, and that supports the operation, including wages, that's part of it. But I think
So just keeping people in jobs, that's our enhancement. That's all we did with this ARPA money?
well, yeah, we ensured that they were available. You know, there were layoffs during this period.
Yeah. When do you think there will be layoffs after all the fake money and everything else is dried up? How long do you think we can do this? Is it 2 years before we start? Because when I first started, it was all layoffs. And the couple years first started here. I've been walking in this building for 36 years. It's always layoffs. When is that budget going to happen? When we're going to have to look around and say, okay, we got to lay people off. Is that impending at all?
I don't think so.
And I'm not saying this year or even next year.
Right.
But I think you raise an important point about just sustainability of our investments, right? And I think why we want to embark on a robust long-term financial planning process so that we can anticipate those early and that we're not caught in the moment having to make difficult choices. So I think you raise a really great point about just the sustainability of the investments, and that coupled with long-term planning will help us identify issues before it gets too late.
Well, if we're going to start paying for T-lines here, that's an extra. It was $8 million for 3 years ago. Now it's $12 million for 3 years, or $15 million for 3 years, and we're going to agree to take that on. That concerns me. Mm-hmm. Jim, you know my history. It was $1 million that the print department was closed over. $1 million. I'm watching money just getting thrown around here like crazy. I don't see it as sustainable, and it concerns me. So that's going to be your job in a couple years, and whatever. But we have to keep an eye on that because the ARPA money's dried up. Last thing, when am I going to get some speed bumps? Been asking for them for years. Speed bumps. Give me one someplace, and I'll be happy. I'll get out of your ear if you give me one speed bump, Jim.
So
Which street did you need one speed bump?
I need more than one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he's in Southie. He needs some over there too. No, I said one to just see if we could kind of rip the Band-Aid off. I need him in multiple places, and I've been asking for them multiple places for about 7 or 8 years.
I think this will probably be addressed by Chief Franklin Hodge at the Capitol hearing, but there is a concerted effort to push through a more streamlined approach to pedestrian safety projects, including speed humps.
Jim, what do you mean by streamlined? Streamlined? Just put them in. That's all. We have engineers. We have smart people. It's not a streamlined process, Jim. I think it's okay. He wants speed bumps, put them in. When a kid gets killed over in Southie, there were certainly speed bumps over there pretty quickly. We certainly figured it out then. Why are we going to wait till people are dying? Thank you. I'll stay around for my next round.
Oh, there's another round.
Yeah. We might be here till your meeting tonight at 5. I'm not sure yet.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Okay, Frank is bringing in the heat. Let's keep it going. All right, so I think that Councilor Baker is definitely bringing some things that we need to be mindful of, right? I know that during the last year's budget season, there was some negotiating going back and forth, and you get what you get when you don't get upset. And we ended up getting $750,000 for municipal supports for housing for our employees, and we're still in the process of getting that up and running. And the fact that we have to have a program designed specifically to help our low-wage municipal employees is just not sustainable. And I think that at some point we are definitely going to have to do a lot more than just hope, thoughts and prayers of like being able to figure out how we're going to be able to keep our employees here. So I do think that there is something to be said about ARPA funding and when it runs out, what does that going to look like for our most vulnerable employees? And I think $750,000 to support their housing is not enough. And I think, I think we just need to do more there. One of the other investments that I think potentially may go away is the community hub schools with BPS. We know that that was also funded through ARPA, so I'm just curious if we can start thinking about sustainability plans and how we're going to maintain, because what's the sense of getting schools to where they need to be and then taking away those support services? It's just, it doesn't make sense. So I think that we're gonna have to make some real serious investments. And you talked about decision-making trade-offs. So I'm just curious, like, how is this administration going to reconcile with those trade-offs? What does that look like in terms of a decision-making model? Can you help us understand what that looks like?
Sure. I mean, luckily we are in a good financial position at the moment, right? So we're not in a situation in this budget where we're having to make cuts and make those types of trade-offs, but anything can happen. The economy is volatile and uncertain, and unfortunately we can't predict everything. So again, I think that's why that long-term modeling that I was talking about just a moment ago is really important. I think the decision-making process would depend on the size and scale of any shortfall we would need to close as a city. I know the city has past experience with closing mid-year shortfalls if there's, or budget shortfalls, if there's any lessons we can learn from that, to ensure that we are utilizing reserves and resources in such a way that we are stabilizing the city budget and not having to make impactful cuts in the event that they're needed. But luckily we're in a position in this upcoming budget where we are in a good financial situation and hope to maintain that going forward.
Thank you. Can you help us understand which are the departments that have had the highest reserves, like revolving funds that they haven't utilized? Are there dollars? Do you have a sense of which departments have the highest reserves or revolving funds? Yep.
In the ARPA funds?
Yep.
Or?
No, in your operating budget.
Oh, in terms of surpluses? Yeah, it's I think becoming more, people are staffing up, they're utilizing their budgets appropriately, so I think we did all right with the snow this year, so that's a budget that will probably return some level of a surplus.
Excuse me a moment, Jim, if you don't have the actual breakdown of those departments, are you able to provide it after?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, because I think for me, it'd just be really helpful to see which departments are utilizing their funds and which ones aren't, and then also what lessons are we learning from that, right? Because if we have a growth mindset, we can't just keep pumping dollars into departments that are not, utilizing those funds. And if we need to rethink and provide more technical assistance so that they can get those dollars allocated in the way that we have envisioned, I just think that there's something there for us to learn in terms of how we do business, right? I think it's important to name. And then, everywhere that I go, everyone is always talking about the fact that they're not being heard. And I do appreciate civic engagement as one of the areas of investments. I'm just curious in terms of what that return on that investment is going to look like. Have you thought about kind of how you're going to measure your success as it relates to civic engagement in planning, civic engagement in, mainly in planning, but also in our Boston Public Schools? I just feel like that is an area for me that I always think that we fall short on. And so can you just talk to me a little bit about kind of that return on investment? What tools are you using to hold departments accountable to civic engagement?
Yeah, no, I think is one of the earlier hearings on equity in the budget. I think Chief Garces and Dewey has talked about building out more technology to track and assure accountability. But but a lot of it is in terms of engaging folks. I think, success is having more people engage. So it's basically having folks that may have never participated in budget processes or civic life generally, awareness of civic activities.
No, I appreciate that, Jim. I think that for me, when I think about what a return on investment looks like, is are people being heard? Not just engaging them, but are we actually listening to what people are asking for? Because for me, that level of engagement, what's the sense of just bringing people in if we're not actually acting on the things that they're asking for? So I think that there needs to be some tools and some mechanisms put in place for us to see whether or not those investments are really making the impact that we envision. Otherwise, it's just a whole bunch of lip service, right? We've been hearing from folks that they don't feel like they're being heard, that they can't get a meeting with so-and-so. And it is a little bit frustrating. And I know I've only been here on this council for 3 years, and I have seen, and I've been through 3 different administrations, and I know what happens when you are the problem child. You usually get disregarded, and I'm okay with that. But I think that we need to do better in terms of our community engagement so that folks don't feel alienated from the process. And I feel like everybody picks and chooses who they want to work with. And I know that for me, this is going to be an area that I think I'm going to pay a lot more attention to. And I think that the rest of the way that I am going to use my time here is that I do feel like we're always fighting, and I'm okay with that because that's just who we are. But I do think that if we don't change and shift the culture and how we interact with one another, then those who are tuning in are going to feel like we're just doing this for theatrics. And I think that we have an opportunity to shift. And I would love to see a little bit more emphasis on those returns. Like, I want to see dollar for dollar. Like, how this dollar is going to impact this outcome in this particular neighborhood. And we're going to see a shift in this direction. That's the level of specificity that I would like to see as the folks come in to our hearings with some level of return on investments, because we say that, but I still am not getting it. And I don't know if y'all need to say it in Spanish so I can understand it, because right now I'm not getting it. I'm still not seeing it. I'm not feeling it. And, and maybe other council colleagues have a lot more savviness than I do, but I just think for me, I'm here to represent the people who are not engaged. And if I'm not getting it, I know the people that follow me aren't getting it either. So I'd like to see a little bit more of a little bit more work done to help us understand that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mejia. Jim, I think, Councilman Mejia makes salient points, and it connects it directly with what Council Baker was talking about. Basically, in terms of metrics, and I appreciate the chief, what's the gentleman's name that was talking about data?
Santi Garces.
Garces. Yeah, Mr. Garces was basically saying that the technology exists, but that the chiefs basically, or the department heads, or that even us, right? Like, there's a tool that we could actually use to measure and to populate how we're voting on our webpage. And then I had to file an ordinance, but the tools exist. It's a matter of actually, mandating folks to do it, and also training folks, and then to get people to actually do it. That's one part that I hear. But the second thing too is that if you're saying let's increase budget in civic engagement, or for PB sake, for participatory budget sake, then you did that, then we want to see numbers. And if that's with a department chief, then that's fine. We'll take that conversation there. But in terms of your metrics, in terms of you actually delivering numbers and saying specifically, we reached out to all of the city of Boston, only 300 people participated. Out of that, the demographics are as such. And so we don't actually have those responses from you. And in order for us to actually be able to analyze whether or not we are being intentional, whether or not we are being equitable, we would need to actually analyze the information, the results, and we don't have that this year. And you did a good job with giving us those responses last year, and I don't see why you couldn't give us those same responses this year as well. So like, if you did civic engagement already in terms of participatory budget, send us information on exactly, what was your outreach efforts, and then how many people participated, and then breakdown of demographics. That way we know that you reached this community, but not this community, and we know who we need to go after next. And then we'll say, well, you invested this many dollars, that doesn't make any sense, let's do more, let's do less. So just in fairness to the requests, also in terms of streamlining things with departments, happy to take that conversation from Council Baker in terms of speed bumps and that with the Department of Streets, but, or Cabinet, but if there's a streamlined process, why is that, right? So that conversation belongs with Chief Yasha, but then the same applies in terms of return on investments and looking at numbers and looking at what quantifying whether or not we are getting results. And then if we're doing it equitably, how are you measuring that? Have you assessed exactly which streets need them, which streets don't need them, and then which areas are getting them and how fast are the responses? My office has those responses, but not everybody does. I'm happy to share in terms of 311 responses and how fast and how equitable the city is being. Don't want to have the conversation right now, but Councilor Baker, happy to share with you in terms of the research and quantifiable data analysis that BU did for us in order for you to see exactly who's getting responded to in terms of the speed bumps. All right, thank you so much. Councilor Lar, you have the floor. Take as much time as you want.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. Councilor Baker, you have the floor.
Wow, you kind of surprised me there. I wasn't quite ready for you, but debt services and that sort of stuff. Do we have capacity in this? So if our debt services is $248 million this year, what's our capacity? Do we have, to go after another bond? And selfishly, I'm looking to go after a bond in District 3 that would speak to things that are happening that I think are happening and going on and can't seem to break through to the importance on these things. So can you talk to me a bit about a diff? Do we have capacity, or am I just going down a road where I'm just going to have bureaucrats saying yes, 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 and then saying no when they leave me?
So the debt service number, let's see, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this.
Because that's not the whole, sorry to break, that's not what we owe, that's just what we're paying. That's our monthly bill or whatever, or yearly bill.
Yep.
So we have X amount of dollars that are in issued bonds that have helped us to build and grow some things.
That's right.
Okay, so do we have, what does our capacity look like?
So I guess if you think about it in terms of our debt service capacity, as Jim mentioned, we have a city policy that debt service is not more than 7% of our operating budget. Right now, I think it's a little bit less than the 7%, so we do theoretically have capacity, but our 5-year plan, our capital plan, our 5-year capital plan sort of assumes that over time we will borrow at a level that will get us up to that 7% limit. So sort of without speaking to the specificity of what we borrow for, of which, if we were to structure some sort of borrowing around a diff, we have capacity over time to get up to a certain level of borrowing. So again, I'm not speaking to sort of what's assumed within that borrowing, but we do assume that our ability to borrow will grow over time.
Yeah, because if it's 7% of a growing budget, this
Exactly.
budget this year is $4.28 billion.
Right.
I want to say 12 years ago, my first budget was 2.4. So we've doubled up, more than doubled our budget in these past 10 years. So our capacity for bonds has also doubled. That would mean if it's 7% of $2 billion, now it's 7% of two.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry.
Sorry,
no, go ahead.
right? So 2
Is
billion.
my
if you
thinking
double-
right there, there's 2 more billion in there, so 7% of 2 billion is one number, 7% of 4 billion is another number.
Sure, and we can show you sort of over time how much our our general obligation bonds have grown, and they have grown significantly. I don't know if it's exactly double, but,
Yeah.
you know, we have, as the budget grows, our ability to service our debt grows, we can borrow more, so on and so forth. So yes, we've grown our capital plan.
And you may or may not be able to answer this, but whereabouts, where are we in that 7% now? Do you know?
I think
I think
around 5,
yeah.
somewhere around 5, but over the next 5 years, we expect a level of borrowing that will get us to that 7.
To the 7? Okay, because I'm gonna want some help in a diff, like just straight conversations is all I'm looking for. If it's not an option, I mean, you had stated at the hearing that we had that we don't really want to, cut out future revenues. But I would argue if the future revenues are being generated from someplace that didn't generate anything, why wouldn't that neighborhood that's gonna suffer through all the building that's happening, why wouldn't that neighborhood, happens to be District 3 in this, that's in my head now, why couldn't that neighborhood, those neighborhoods benefit from, say, a social bond that would help us build a field house, that would help us stand up more job training? Because I don't see very much in here for job training. I see 500,000 for
Life sciences.
life science. So, like, that's a concern of mine, that a neighborhood can totally be changed for good or bad, however you look at it. But it concerns me that the chief financial officer doesn't think that neighborhood, which is, I would argue, traditionally been overlooked. I initially ran because my neighborhood was overlooked city services, everything, every way, my neighborhood that I grew up in. So why can't we go after that future dollars?
And I will say, like as I was saying, that we assume that the budget grows, and that is as a result of new revenue that come, from the value of those new properties. That would be part of that development in this particular case. So we're sort of assuming that growth. It's really a matter of, do we want to dedicate and sort of constrain the borrowing that we do as a result of that increased revenue or increased property value? Do we want to constrain it within that geographic region, right? So that's a policy decision for
I would argue
right,
yes,
and it's a policy decision for policymakers to consider as we're making those choices. But I hear your point, but I'm trying. We
When you
are
say
sort
policymakers, who are you talking
Sorry,
about?
Councilor Baker.
You want to go on to somebody else? And we can come back?
No, would really love to hear you finish your sentence.
What was I about to say?
Policymakers making decisions about cutting dollars, future dollars.
Of course. So presumably to institute a diff here in the city of Boston, that would be required by ordinance, I would assume, right? So, the mayor and city councilors agreeing to pass an ordinance for a diff. That's what I mean by policymakers. That it would be a legislative requirement.
So us.
Yeah.
This body. Yeah, and it would speak to, well, I don't need to go into that anymore. Very disappointed that we've gone through all this money here and we don't have any sort of buyout for the people that were coming in here the whole time.
Point of clarification, sorry,
Yeah.
Councilor Baker. Chief, would you just not rephrase it, but can you clarify that you're saying that then it's on us, it's an ordinance that we should file to get a vote on in order to borrow for or to actually implement a diff?
So I would want to check with my colleagues on just exactly what would be legislatively required in order to establish a diff. I don't know. I think it would require a legislative action, but that's my assumption.
Yeah, my understanding would probably an ordinance, because we can do it as the body that is the city of Boston, but we can say it all we want. If the administration and the CFO and the auditor and the assessor don't want to do it, then it doesn't happen. That's my understanding on it. So maybe the vote, they can still say no to it over there. But what I'm trying to impress in is there's money here now, and I'm trying to capture some of it for my neighborhood, for my field house, which will be, we talk here on page 2 or something about generational investments investing in young people, investing in older people. That's all we're trying to do over at the Columbia Point Fieldhouse, is invest in people. And it's surrounded by housing developments. So, and I believe the state has given a little more money there, and I still am baffled why this city is not investing in this project. Baffling. And the ARPA money can't be used for retirement in any way?
I'm not.
Like for buyouts and things like that? Because I think we're going to end up with a pocket of ARPA. Someone was speaking about it earlier. I think we're going to end up with a pocket of ARPA money. Do you know if we are able to use it for retirements, whether it's paying down liabilities or offering to people to, here you go, you were here during the pandemic when everybody else was at home. I'm talking about the security guards that were here, the custodians that were here, when we were all home. Like, are we giving them anything? You said we kept them employed. That's great, but we haven't done anything for them. We were all home. They were all here. There's people through this whole building here that should be taken care of someplace.
There was some element of collective bargaining that did.
$1,000? You gave them $1,000?
Yes, so that was a payment to acknowledge the.
Okay, and then out of that 1,000, 330 got taken out in taxes, so you got 770 to spend
Councilor
whatever way you
Baker,
want.
can you clarify $1,000 for what?
1,000. So what I believe the administration did for all the people that were here, your security guards, your SEIU workers, I think, and I'm not totally sure, I've just kind of heard it, that they got an over and above $1,000 for being here for 3 years while we were all at home. I don't think it's enough, especially when we blew through the $500 million.
This was a bonus in the form of
A bonus. So if you looked at the chart, it would say other. Monies, overtime, other. A bonus, probably. And I just don't think it's enough. I think we've all given the security guards awards and everything. We give them $1,000.
Well, I filed for them to get a raise.
Yeah. They're the ones that give them the raise. But it has to be a grade change.
Does this mean that you're interested in making an amendment in the budget to give them raises?
Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't be an amendment is what I'm saying, Madam Chair. Walk your talk is what I'm saying over here. Everybody loves the security guards. Everybody loves those. We hear them all talking about the low-paid workers, right, who can't even afford to live here. But we still talk about how much we love them. We give them $1,000. It's just not enough. It's not enough. Where is the housing stipends? Where is the real money? I mean, you can go to Longwood and make more money as a security guard. They start more money than our guys that are here, men and women that are here 10 years. They start about what we're finishing on. The grades have to all be improved across the board. And every single city department head under this new administration got huge raises. We voted on them all. Huge raises. Nobody ever got paid like that in the city. You know?
And they deserved it, and so does the other departments.
Absolutely, absolutely they do, especially the amount of business that we're doing. But they deserve it. The lower paid wages, people need it. Let's figure out ways to do housing. There's ways we can figure it out. You know, we give I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Baker. I think the wonderful thing about you bringing up these points is that everything is a conversation. And through this process, hopefully the administration is encouraged to hear some of these points, take it back. It's not final. Even if we're not making amendments, there is a process of, the chair and OBM and others in administration to having these conversations. So hopefully that we discuss them back and forth and see where we can possibly make some of these shifts. It's not over till it's over, so looking forward to that. I would ask if any of my colleagues have any final comments, but there is Mr. John Provenzano. Mr. Provenzano, can you please step to the mic for your testimony, and then we'll go to final comments? Thank you.
My name is John Provenzano. I live in South Boston my whole life.
Mr. Provenzano, tu parli italiano?
Sì,
You have to speak it in Italian today.
I can't.
Oh, no.
All I know is swears. No. Thank you for through the chair, thank you for allowing me to speak. Jim, thank you for being here. I'm sorry I don't know your name, but thank you for answering some questions and not answering others. I'm a blue-collar guy. This guy just said everything that I want, and he's not my counselor, but I know him, I respect him, and I respect all of you. But what I wanted to do, my first question, if I get a couple of minutes, was I wanted to ask, my pet peeve was the property tax. I'm a victim of what happened to the property tax because it went so high on owner-occupied taxes that when I retired, and everybody will get there sometime, when you get there, that $17,000 a year in property tax looks like $34,000 when you retire because your pension or whatever you get for your yearly income is cut in half. And I'm a property of that. That happened to me. I had to turn the house over to my son, thank God. And we're still in South Boston. I have a granddaughter in Dorchester. I have a granddaughter in Hyde Park. I think Frank represents the Dorchester people. My son and my granddaughter are there. Frank, what's the name of the street next to Elena Road? I'm drawing a blank. The next one over. Elma. I have 3 great-grandchildren on that street. They play in the yard and they play on the sidewalk. I've been asking to get speed bumps there. They fly from Adams Street onto that street, and it's just horrendous. And I've actually been out there. I stand on the corner sometimes when the kids are playing, when the people are coming around Adams Street. So, I mean, it's a priority. You've got to find it. Keep it simple. Speed bumps. They're so important to every neighborhood. Everybody's speeding. I came here to talk about the property tax. So you've got my idea on the property tax. What I'd like to see is that everybody that's owner-occupied, not pulling in big rents. You know, we know the big rents that are coming in all over the city. But the people that just living, have been there. I've been there my whole life. I owned that home for 40 some odd years. And I had to turn it over. Now, things happened to make that, it's my fault. I lost some money in the stock market, this, that, and everything. And all of a sudden, my income was a lot less than what it should be. My sons are going to be going through that within the next couple of years. My daughter has already gone through it. Her husband just retired, and he saw exactly what I was talking about. Everybody can relate to that. I wanted to get a show of hands of the councils when they were here. Who is for getting reduction in the property tax for owner-occupied residents? And I wish, if anybody's watching on TV, I'd love to see a raise of hands of who's for that, because I have 4 counselors here, and I respect them all. I try to get to every office to find out what I can, I don't even know how to bring it to the State House, but I've already gone to the State House, and I'm saying, this has to come to you guys, and you have to help us. But the mayor, who I respect, can send that over, and I'm hoping she's listening too, so she'll know. She knows my face and my mouth and my town. She's come over to my town, so that was my priority. But Frank, Councilor Baker, hit on another thing, which was the speed bumps, which is safety. It's a small item. If we keep it simple, we could stop kids from getting hurt. And we've had that happen in South Boston already a couple of times, and I'm praying it doesn't happen in any neighborhood. And you guys could probably tell me where it has happened from speeding. These are the simple things that you guys have to get through. And all those big projects. I'll give you an example. The money that's coming in, if you don't mind, the money that's coming in on the real estate tax, say in Seaport Boulevard, those big, beautiful buildings, all the condos, very well-to-do people living in that whole neighborhood. If you drove down Seaport Boulevard right now, you will see potholes that are big enough to flatten your tire. Very simple. Getting potholes taken care of throughout the city. I've gone to most of the towns, Dorchester, Hyde Park, Jamaica Plain. I've driven through them. I got plenty of time. I'm retired. I can do this, but I'm concerned about what's happening to our city. The chair, who I respect an awful lot, because this is one hell of a committee, you know, Ways and Means. That's my bag. I love that stuff. And you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job in this, but we have to bring it down to the most important things, which is the people that are living in this city, the people that are paying the taxes. What is it, 77% of the budget? I think since I've been coming here, it was below 70. It's 77% now. Just taking care of those people that have been here for so many years, to give them a little bit more of a break. I know they get a break owner-occupied, but it's a small percentage. Even if that comes across, even if we push that to the State House through, what do you do it, through an ordinance? Is that how it's done? You guys vote on it and you send it there? Oh, God, that's what I'm praying you guys can do, because I have a lot of respect for you, and I love hearing everybody, but I really have to be honest in saying, that guy over there stole my thunder. The safety part, no, I love it. The safety part, if I could just for a minute, that was the speed bumps. I'm going to give you a little, I've been coming here for a lot of years. And my third, pest control, I kind of scribbled down what I just wanted to mention. I go back to when there was a guy named Ray, who was a city councilman, and they went on to be president, went on to be mayor. And this is what he did. And I wish all the councilors could do this. One day a month, or even one day a week, take off the pretty suit, take off the nice clothes, put on a sweatshirt and jeans, and jump in a garbage truck that's doing your neighborhood. Every one of you. Ray Flynn did this back in the 80s. And I was really hot to trot on. I knew Mel King, I knew Ray well. It was a great time to be involved in politics. But these guys were right from the street. They were right from the street. And they knew what had to be done. Ray drove around on a weekly basis. The streets of South Boston at the time were in such violation of garbage removal. And I could give you a whole list of names because I've been there my whole life. Plastic bags instead of barrels. He took notes. Every council should do this. Honest to God, you should just try it. Your eyes would open up to not only the speed bumps, the potholes, but you'll see firsthand the violations that go on. Now, that's our problem, not the residents, everybody that lives in the town. Ray made notes, one week after the other. This one, that one. Polite letter sent to the home. We'll provide you with barrels, with covers. We'll do whatever we can to make this a safer city, because the rat problem back then was horrendous. That was 1983.
What about today?
Excuse me?
What about today?
I didn't hear.
Let's bring it to today. What's the rat problem today?
Wow. Come over to my town. Come on over. Well, you were over there not too long ago, and I remember both you and Mahia were there, and I wish you got treated a little bit better than what happened. There was just one goofball that made a stupid remark. But other than that, come over to the town, and you'll see between the L Street...
Did she tell you she's my friend now?
Excuse me?
Did she tell you that she loves me now? She's a friend now.
Oh, that was the other guy.
Say that in the microphone.
We're friends now. It's all better now.
Well, we've always been friends. We just have differences of opinions.
Well, the remark that was made.
Oh, from that person?
Yes.
I grew up in South Boston. I'm Italian, if you can't tell.
Mr.
You know
Provenzano,
what I say?
I really appreciate you coming in. I gave you 10 minutes because
Well, thank you, because I'm the only one. So you gave me just one more minute?
I gave you all the 2 minutes of anyone
Okay.
who would have came.
So
And,
when you have the other meetings, I can come and speak on those as far as the budget.
for 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Well,
Okay.
if there was people here, I wouldn't even go on this long, but so I did the rat thing, right?
No, you always go on that long, but I appreciate it. We just don't have the time for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, when I go to the offices, everyone's office, yours is usually, the door is usually closed. So
Mine.
I haven't gotten in there, but
Well,
I
why did you
talked to
knock?
your aide. She was tremendous.
Thank you.
She was tremendous. She got me to be able to park down the street, which I didn't know was there. God bless her. Because I was taking the bus in and, you know, putting out the door for the bus or whatever, and the ride is aggravating and all of that stuff. So I'm down the street. Jim, we did take that back to the mayor with these subjects and just bring it down to the level of the heart, and we'll get things done better. I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me talk this
appreciate
long.
you.
Thank you to the other counselors. Appreciate you. I haven't talked to you yet, but I'll be over to knock on your door. And the property tax is the priority, the speed bumps, the safety, and the rodent problem. That's my bit. Thank you so much for allowing me.
All important things. Thank you.
Ciao, Bella.
Ciao. Grazie, Mr. Provenzano.
See.
So I think it's Councilor Baker for final comments.
He went.
He went, then you went. Now it's his turn for final comments.
We could do the tape rewind. He asked questions, and then you went into, we didn't get to ask a third round question. That's okay.
Yes, you did. I have it documented here, Councilman here. You see? You missed the intro. You did that one and you did that one. And then Councilor Baker did all three because he was here. Now we're at final comments and he's first. Councilor Baker, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out today. I just, you talk a lot about engaging and engaging and engaging and engaging. We have one meeting. I had one meeting with you guys. And of course, yeah, we engage with Chantel, but this is actually our budget first. We are elected to keep an eye on the budget, and a lot of people talk about not being heard. There's a big aspect of that for me, not being heard around here. And that's all, I gotta say about it. I think you guys could do a little bit of a better job at really asking us what we want. A lot of it looks kind of aspirational. There's we got 7 million going here, this going here. And I know we drill down in when the departments are here, but it doesn't really feel that you are engaged with us, with me. I'll speak for me, that's all. I think one meeting asked on a high level what I would be interested in, that's all. But thank you for your time, and DIF is gonna be very important to me, so thank you. So if you wanna get any information over to me about how I should be going about this DIF, please let me know. I wanna do it in conjunction, not that way. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Chief and Jim, if you could send us some information just to verify. Councilor Baker's suggestion is that we file, but that it could always be vetoed by the administration. And if you have any final points in that, I wasn't able to find any information beyond that either. As you can see, I filed for a hearing to discuss it because of that confusion. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Councilor Baker and also just as I continue to navigate this process, right, I think that there's a lot at play here to John's earlier points in terms of how we get down in the nitty-gritty of situations, right? There's a lot of hypotheticals and a lot of theories, right? There are a lot of people who I agree are in suits, right? So for me, I walk into the space and I see sometimes a big disconnection with what people are really going through and then what gets put on paper. And that's a matter of privilege. And everybody has privilege, right? Including myself, that I'm here in this chamber. I understand and recognize the privilege that I have to serve, and the fact that I even have a mic to be able to amplify my voice, right? So that's a privilege. But I also think that there is something to be said about how we navigate these processes. There's a lot of intellectual kind of like thoughts, and at the end of the day, people are just struggling to make their ends meet, and they want to make sure that the city is responding to that need. And I think that intention versus impact is always going to be something that I'm looking at. It's like, okay, this is what we're intention, this is what we're hoping for, and it all sounds very aspirational, but this is my third budget, and I really kind of want to start seeing some real serious like return on investments. Like I keep talking about that, and I want to feel the impact. What I hear from these streets is like, how is that helping me? How is that going to transform my life? How is this really going to make a difference? And I think that that level of understanding is something that I can't answer, right? And we try, but I just don't feel like we're meeting the mark. And I think that when we're talking about speed bumps and we're talking about, rat infestation and we're talking about property taxes, those are all things that are really tangible, right? That people can see, wow, this is the return on the investment, right? Especially for folks who have dedicated their entire lives and careers to the city of Boston and can't afford to stay here. And I wanted to say that again, cannot afford to stay here. So I'm encouraged by the bold direction that we're moving in and the robust conversations that we're going to be having during this budget cycle. But I still am just, I don't know, I feel like we have a lot of work to do, and I don't know if we are really like leading with the people that are most impacted. I feel like there's a disconnect, and that is about class. That is a big issue here, is class. Not just race, and race is important, but class is just something that I think that we don't lean into enough. And I think that we would all be better by really looking at class as an issue of disparity here in the city of Boston, because we talk about equity a lot, and I appreciate it, but I think that class is, it shows up in this chamber. It shows up in how we show up. It shows up in the type of questions that we ask or don't ask. It shows up in the numbers that are reflected here and how we talk about the people that we're here to serve. All of those things are important to me, and I will continue to uplift them, because I always say the only people who can take me out are the ones that put me in, and I'm not here to play games with people's lives. And oftentimes we play a lot of politics in negotiating the budget cycle, and everybody's like, it's like the Hunger Games. But I always say, we all need to do better in how we advocate for the people that we serve. And I look forward to the season of games with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Lara?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. I think I just want to echo what my council colleagues have really shared. I think that, Councilor Baker and Councilor Mejia are really hitting the nail on the head in terms of what the budget process looks like. And I think that from what I'm hearing, and from my own experience during this budget process, we are having conversations with all the councilors to ask information about what we want to see, whether it be for our district or for the entire city. And it doesn't seem like any of the things that we requested were included in this budget. And so if, as city councilors, we are meant to be the representatives of the constituents of the city, and we're working on this budget collaboratively, then what is the administration and what is the Office of Budget Management telling not the city councilors, and by proxy our constituents, about what their needs are and how they're going to be included and reflected in this budget? It was disheartening for me to look at the budget, both the capital plan and the budget, and see that a lot of the issues that my constituents and people in the city have been advocating for are not included there. And from what I'm hearing from Councilor Mejia, and what I'm hearing from Councilor Baker and Councilor TFA, and I'm sure that if I check in with all of the rest of my council colleagues, they'll have similar reactions. is that our requests for our constituents are not there. And so who are you listening to? How is the administration making decisions? I'm really, really happy that you worked collaboratively with the chiefs, given that their departments are going to be the ones that are going to be implementing the budget, to ask them what they need, but it's not just about them. It's about what the people on the ground also identify as their priorities. And maybe they're not in the weeds enough to request, you know, hey, we need 2 EFTs for this to be able to really support 311 and so on and so forth, but they are in the weeds enough to know that some of our most vulnerable communities are not getting what they need, and that they need increased support for their speed bumps, and that they need X, Y, and Z done, and that we need more Hokies to pick up the trash in the street, and so on and so forth. And so this is our second time going through this going through the new budget process. My hope is that the council can come together as a body to really look at the kind of budget that we want to see, because ultimately that is what it is. The mayor is submitting a budget to us, and this body is going to submit a budget to the mayor that not only includes your priorities, but also includes the priorities of our constituents. And that is what a collaborative process looks like. And so whether or not you veto the budget, send it back, my hope is that my council colleagues are willing to stand together and say that a collaborative budget, one that not only includes what you've sent to us, but what we need to see on there, is going to move forward. And it's the thing that we're going to vote yes on. I have questions and concerns about the BPS's budget, particularly around what money is getting to the actual classrooms. I am the only person on the council with a small child at BPS. I have a child with special needs who is in a full inclusion classroom. And what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of money floating around at BPS. And our teachers are saying that they don't have the things that they need in their classroom. So I'm really curious about how much money is going into hiring and how top-heavy BPS is, and I'm going to be looking at that during this budget process, and it's really going to influence whether or not I vote yes on the BPS budget if I feel like the money is not actually getting to the students or the teachers on the ground. I understand that we need support staff, and also there is such thing as having too much staff to manage something, right? Is it worth the staff that we're paying to manage something if the money isn't getting to BPS? So I thank you. I'm sure that this was an incredible labor of love and commitment to put this budget forth, but it is not. This is not reflective to me, at least, and I want to talk to the rest of my council colleagues this is not a budget that reflects or even sends a message to the council. Yes, we had these meetings with you. You let us know what you wanted, and we at all considered what was in those conversations. So that's going to change throughout the budget process. I thank the chair for all of her work, and I'm excited to work more collaboratively to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor, my apologies for the schedule and having it. I tried as much as possible to have some virtual. Please, my kisses to your son, because I definitely want him to be in the hearing. Bring him if you must. We'll all take turns sitting with him. And then the other thing is, let's talk about what you need to make virtual in order to accommodate that. In terms of the process that we're all talking about, we understand that there's a process with the chiefs, and there's a process, an informal process with the counselors. If we were to be transparent, we would have that process written somewhere. And Jim, I appreciate that you sent the email early on with the timeline and the process. I have yet to receive the memos from the department heads. I would like to compare what exactly they requested and what the administration decided to agree with. And then as well as any communications from my colleagues. My colleagues, of course, will tell me, but if you have comparisons, then we can actually practically look at it and say, here it is right here. I know that we listened here, but we didn't listen here. So that the conversations are reasonable. And then if the public is not left to say, yeah, but is that accurate? Did the mayor or the administration actually not listen to the counselors, right? And so I think it's just a matter of making things very transparent. And it's not over yet. the mayor and the administration, you guys are like, hey, they have this amendment power. The least we give them, then the more we can negotiate. Then we can meet halfway. It's like when you go to an interview, you want to ask for a lot of money so that at least you can land in the middle, sort of thing. And this is what it feels like. But it's lacking transparency because the process is nowhere to be found. It's not written somewhere. It's not formal. And the needs assessment in terms of the community at large, Boston at large, you actually don't have that. There's been no disparity study done. It was one of the things that I asked in my budget asks, to do a disparity study before we can actually talk about whether or not we want to implement a nonprofit, a third-party company, or some sort of metrics to measure equity in the budget. Before we could do that, we need to understand, is this system actually racist? Are we perpetuating a racist system? And if we're not, then we're doing well. There's no need for improvement. If we all agree that there's needs for improvement, then before we can even implement metrics, we need to understand the need. There has been no assessment. So how can anyone say where the money is required? We can't continue to be sort of this reactionary policy people where we just put Band-Aids on things because the squeaky wheel gets the worm and everybody else has to wait. Or, for example, there's a meeting in Charlestown and the folks in Charlestown said, swimming pool, we need a swimming pool. 300 active voters show up. Guess what? The very next budget, Charlestown's getting a swimming pool. But Roxbury, for example, JP, Agliston, they would say, we need workforce. We need something for seniors. We need something for kids on the spectrum. Where's our sensory garden? And guess what? They've been asking for decades. They won't get it. You know why? We know why. Because those communities, the less affluent communities, are not integrated as a community. They vote less. They have less money. The classism thing that Julia is talking about, Councilman here. And so in order for us to implement metrics based on needs, based on a transparent process, we have to talk about this stuff. We have to be honest about it. Some people are not loud enough because they don't know how to navigate resources, because they don't have access to those resources, because they're disinvested, and so they're just not heard. Or you do your best from your desk or research in front of you, but the counselors can help. We know what our constituents need, especially this group of counselors. We're very grassroots. We're on the ground. We know constituents, we know every business, we know everything that's going on in our district. So I don't think the conversation is over yet. I think there's still room for negotiation. And welcome to budget. And we look forward to more conversations. As you've noticed, I've invited you to a lot of working sessions. I hope that you don't take that personal. It's needed. Last year, we just felt like, where's Jim? Where's OBM? Like, where's legal? So through that process, hopefully, we can still talk about giving the constituents some of the things that the counselors have been asking for. And hopefully, we'll be able to come to a reasonable solution beyond what you're proposing. All right. Do you have any comments before we close?
No, just thank you for this opportunity to work with you guys on this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. We're looking forward to the weeks ahead. We know it'll be a lot of back and forth, so thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.